Yes, sir. Please start.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are yet again on the verge of starting our series on mentoring SMPs, small and medium practitioners. And let me very candidly put it forth before you that this program is being jointly hosted by the Interal Standard Boards and the SMP Committee, Small and Medium Practitioner Committee, largely known as Committee for Members in Practice now, under the able presidency of C. Atul Gupta and chairmanship of CA Satish Gupta ji from Jaipur. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all. I will keep my keynote address after the address of the Honorable President because he has a very pressing engagement now, but he said, no, I will come and speak to member. In fact, one of our branch, Salem branch, is having its Golden Jubilee Day today. Over to the Honorable President for his words of wisdom. So please.
Thank you, Nandaji, the Honorable Chairman of the Internal Audit Standard Board, the Chairman of SMP Committee, CA Satish Gupta ji, our respected colleagues and the distinguished speakers from the, they are all the helm of affairs at the different organizations. And a very good evening to all of you. And at the outset, I congratulate CA Charanjot Singh Nandaji and Satish Gupta ji for putting their best efforts to see that how our SMP firms can be empowered into a very important area of our profession, that is the internal audit. Friends, you will agree with me that with the passage of time and looking into the scenario, now the management are looking for the more and more assurance from the chartered accountant, the assurance service provider, and in that direction, the internal audit are playing a very important role. When the management is professional, they want to have that kind of assurance that all the laws are being followed. There is no because the more and more technology-driven activities are happening. So all these things are happening within the four wall of the regulatory requirements and with the prudential norms. So all the companies are looking more and more towards the internal audit, and I can see that every day there are number of tender, or I will say the requests are coming in the market that okay, we are looking for an internal audit at the one or the other organization and the other location. Friends, you will agree with me that the Internal Audit Standard Board is playing a very important role. And even the day before yesterday, I participated in the meeting of the Internal Audit Standard Board, and I share that that how we can more and more give the empowerment to our firms into this Internal Audit Standard Board by organizing the various workshops, the various training programs, specialized training programs, and even developing the standards for the internal audit. I'm aware that there are number of standards are already being developed in the last year and this year as well. But there will be that the efforts will already there on. Nandaji has already on their efforts in spite of the corona pandemic to complete all the requirement of the internal audit standard. And I believe in a very short span of time, these standards will be available to the members at large. Friends, at the same time, I just wish to request all of you that when we are talking about the internal audit, or even we are talking about the normal stat audit of our profession, it is very important that we reskill ourselves, because you will agree with me that more and more digital disruption is there, and with the advent of the ABCD, Nandaji mentioned that I am right now these days because that is the future of our profession, that is the need of our profession, that is the artificial intelligence and blockchain is actually creating an environment that when the repetitive jobs, the routine jobs will be outsourced to the system. And it will be very important for all of us that rather than doing the audit of the omission, we have to do the audit of the communication part. And by having the knowledge of the cyber security and data analytics, that is C&D, we can very well handle that kind of a situation. And that's why I used to give the number of examples that how the repetitive jobs, the routine jobs will be outsourced to the system. You can see today the doctors, in the case of doctors, the operations are being handled by the robots. The opinions are being drafted by the systems. The robots are doing the journal entries. In the toll plaza, the system is handling the giving the access to the passengers. So all these things are there, which are giving us a kind of a clue that the days are not far away. As you are aware about the recent report of the World Economic Forum, which also mentioned that in the next 2 years, there will be a loss of around 75 million jobs, and specifically in two very important area of our profession, that is accounting, bookkeeping, audit, and that exactly mentioned that there will be the 133 million new jobs will be there, and specifically in the area of the data analytics. All these things are giving, I will say, the substantiating the point which was they were there in the few years back. There was a report that after 15 years, our kids will be doing the job. Whatever the kids will be doing the job, the 60%, 5% jobs are not in the existence today. So what I'm trying to convey, my friends, here, that when the internal audit is a very, very important area of our profession, it's an emerging area of our profession. There is a more and more dependency which is coming in the professional management on the internal audit. It is very important for all of us that we update ourselves, equip ourselves, we reskill ourselves as per the requirement. And at this point of time, the role of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, the board, is very important, that not only we develop that kind of an environment that where the members will get that kind of a requisite skill, but also create that kind of a standardization of the process, so that it can give the value add to the users of the report. So all these things are there, and I believe that with the guidance of all the eminent personalities who are going to speak today, there will be a very knowledgeable session. It will be a lot of takeaways from these sessions, and it will be a happy learning for all of my colleagues across India and even at the global level. So with this, I convey my sincere thanks to Nandaji, Prasanna Kumarji, Satish Guptaji for giving me this opportunity, and my apology that I just came out from the another session from Salem. So it's a beauty of the technology that a few minutes before I was there in Salem, and now I'm at another program of the Internal Audit Standard Board, and I'm going back to the Salem. So I have to, because my schedule was there to speak from 4:55 to 5:15. So I have to go back, and so that's why I requested that to speak first rather than Honorable Satish Gupta ji or the Nandaji will speak. So thank you very much, and my sincere thanks to all the speakers who spare their valuable time and for the cause of the alma mater. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's indeed an honor to have you here amidst another program you came in. Really thankful to you. You have made us held our heads high. Thank you so much, President, sir. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have another star of the day, C.A. Satish Gupta, who is the chairman of Members in Practice. Mr. Gupta belongs to Jaipur, and he has been elected to the council. He is the chairman of the Rajasthan Tax Bar Association as well. So I'd request Mr. Gupta to come. But before that, I have my vice chairman of both the committees, C.A. Prasanna Kumar, who comes from Visakhapatnam. He is the vice chairman of Interal Standard Board as well as of the SMP committee. So we will have his vote of thanks from him. But before that, I would request Satish ji to kindly give his views on how SMPs can be empowered in practice, how we can put them at a perspective where they start performing. If you speak about chartered accountants, I am reminded of a couplet which I would like to share with you. The couplet says, तारीफ की चाहत नाकाम लोगों की फितरत है, तारीफ की चाहत नाकाम लोगों की फितरत है, काबिल लोगों के तो दुश्मन भी कायल होते हैं. So Mr. Gupta excellently does the job of mentoring people in practice so that they are put in the right perspective. Over to Mr. Gupta for his words of wisdom. Mr. Gupta, the dice is all yours now.
Nandaji, thanks a lot. I can say in absentia our Honorable President, C. Atul Gupta ji, C.A. very young, very dynamic council member, very dynamic chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board, C.A. Prasanna Kumar D. sir, my co-chairman of the Committee for Members in Practice and co-chairman of this IASB also. Mr. Jaiman Bhatt, President and Group CFO of Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited, Mr. Satish Shenoy, Head Corporate Management, Aditya Birla Group, Mr. Balaji Ganathan, India Head Fidelity Investments, ASC Corporation, young brothers and sisters in profession. Friends, at the very outset, I am thankful to to my elder brother, I'm source of energy, source of knowledge, and I can say troubleshooter in the concept. He is always helping us how to shoot the trouble and how to remove the things, how to remove the bottlenecks, whatever the problem is there. Nandaji is always available there. Friends, and the theme of this particular series of the webinars, a wonderful theme, mentoring SMPs. SMP is near to our hearts because we all know that around 99% CA firms in India are the SMPs. So it is always near to hearts. And today's topics, internal audit learning, expectation of banks from internal audit by SMPs, and etc., are very important topics. And I think they are going to be dealt with the, I can say, masters of the corporates. So it is going to be a difference making in the lives of the professionals today. Friends, as told by Nandaji, I would definitely like to share some of the initiatives taken by the Committee for Members in Practice during this year under the dynamic leadership of our President, C. Atul Gupta ji, Vice President C. Nihar Bhai, and the, I can say, collective wisdom of the concept. Friends, we all know that this is the year, a different year, because we are facing a global pandemic, and now it is spreading like anything. And what we are seeing that the need, this is the time when our professional brothers and sisters were asking that we are having liquidity problems, and how can we cope up with that liquidity problem. So friends, we came up with a unsecured loan facility for our chartered accountant friends, whether he is in practice or whether he is in job. This facility is available for all of our chartered accountant members. And the friends who are not knowing about this facility, I would definitely like to touch upon some of the major features of this initiative taken by the Committee for Members in Practice, that this unsecured and collateral free loan up to rupees 30 lakhs is available to our members on an interest rate of 9.9% per annum on reducing basis. And there is no need of any collateral security, there is no need of any security, there is no need of any guarantee, there is no hidden clause, and there is a facility of even prepayment without any cost, and there is a facility of takeover of loans also. And so it's a very good and unique, and I would like to say, Nandaji and Prasanna sir, that this NBFC has disbursed more than rupees 150 crores in only 2 months' time, and to our members. So I think our members who are in need of liquidity have got a good scheme by our ICI. और जो हम लोग सुनते थे कि what ICI is doing for our members, I think this is a very humble on behalf of ICI and from the Committee for Members in Practice, that we are with our members. We are with our members, not only at this particular pandemic time, but always we are with our members. Second thing which I would like to share, which is also a financial measure taken up by the Committee for Members in Practice, that we, along with the Bank of Baroda, are providing an arrangement to our members of a credit card facility, having a minimum credit limit of rupees 1 lakh. This particular credit card will authorize our all members, whether it is young members of 1 month, 2 months, that he can get a credit of 1 lakh without any further requirements. So it is also giving a very good to our members. And Nanda sir, I would like to say that more than 10,000 cards have been disbursed by the Bank of Baroda to our members by up to this time. That is within a period of 2 months. Apart from these two steps, two initiatives, we are coming up with some software for the cloud-based accounting, software for the system-based accounting, software for the GST, software for the income tax problem, software for the secretarial practice, software for the labor law practice. So everything, whether it's software for the audit tools. So we are coming up with more than 15 softwares arrangements with different companies for our members. They can use, and almost all the arrangements are free for 3 years for the small and membership, small and medium partnership, proprietorship firms of the chartered accountant. So this is the software side we are doing. I have discussed with you some finance sector initiative. One more thing which I would like to share, that we have also come up with some insurance policies, very good insurance policies, competitive premiums, whether it is life insurance, whether it is general insurance, having the health field, having the motor, household, professional indemnity, each and every policy we are taking care of. So there are several things we have arranged. And Nandaji, I would like to share that there are several things in our pipeline. We are working on the very competitive internet connection. We are working on the providing for and very soon we are coming up that we are going to provide laptops with the official and the to our members for sending to their article clerk in a very competitive prices. Very soon we are coming up with those. We are coming up with some good arrangements on the cloud-based accounting, research on income tax cases, research on GST cases. So several things we are trying to bring for our members. So it is simply a sharing on this, I can say, the very important movement that today we are discussing the mentoring SMPs under the dynamic leadership of our Nandaji and his committee. And I think this is simply brief because we want to listen our honorable guest speakers today, and that will definitely make a difference in our professional life. So I don't want to speak much about the initiative of the CMP, but it is simply an introduction that don't worry, ICI with you all members, आपके साथ खड़ी ICI, please you just give your feedback, suggestions to the ICI, so we can bring more arrangement for our members. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Nanda sir, for giving our committee this opportunity, and thanks a lot to Satish ji, Jamin Bhatt ji, and Balaji Anna for coming here and for sparing their valuable time for our members. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prasanna sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Satiji, for your scintillating words of wisdom for the entire membership at large. You will instill confidence in them and they will understand the value of negotiation and deal making. We are providing such facilities to our membership, which is more than 3 lakhs, and students which are more than 13 lakhs. So a family, big not family of close to 15 lakh resources. So ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that this series, web series, is a pertinent series on mentoring SMPs for internal audit. The sole objective of this series is to empower small and medium practitioners to assimilate and apply ways for carrying out internal audits in an efficient manner, whilst improving their visibility amongst the internal audit community so that additional professional opportunities are created for them. Intensifying regulatory demands, rapidly evolving technology, and many other challenges in today's dynamic business landscape are making it more important than ever for organizations to have a strong internal audit department. As I reflect on the path that internal audit has taken over the past decade, I feel that it is in most organizations that we need to demonstrate our ability and versatility to meet the demands of ever-increasing complex organizations. Senior management, board of directors, audit committees, and other stakeholders are able to bank on the internal auditors to deliver consistent value-added results. Internal auditing is a growing global profession that is deeply rooted in the concepts of transparency, reliability, effectiveness, and ethics. more interconnected, the importance of risk management, the importance of internal control and good corporate governance is increasing in all business sectors and in all regions of the country. These pillars of an effective internal audit function will be discussed today. Aims the needed knowledge, skills and abilities and competencies to obtain key insights related to their audit environment. This also includes threats and opportunities that are presently evolving on the horizon. The learnings for internal auditors from the collapse of Wirecard will be dealt by Mr. Balaji Ranganathan, who had defined business opportunities at Fidelity Investments. A strong internal control system, including an independent and effective internal audit function, is part of sound corporate governance. Banking supervisors must be satisfied as to the effectiveness of a bank's internal audit function, that policies and practices are followed, and that management takes appropriate and timely corrective action in response to internal control weaknesses identified essentially by the internal auditors. An internal audit function provides vital assurance to the bank's board of directors and senior management and bank supervisor as to the quality of the bank's internal control system. In doing so, the function helps reduce the risk of loss and reputational damage to the bank. Mr. Jamin Bhatt, President and Group CFO of Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited, will be deliberating on the expectations of the banks from SMPs internal audit function. The board is working, your board, the Internal Audit Standard Board, is working relentlessly to bring out high quality technical literature in the form of standards on internal audit and technical guides, studies, manuals, which constitute an important tool in helping the internal auditors to provide effective and efficient internal audit services to the clients and or employees. The board has begun the mammoth task of revising the standards and is in the path of trying to make them mandatory for certain companies. The mandatory status of standards will act as the starting point for ICI to chalk out roadmap for enhancing relevance of internal audit profession. During this ongoing COVID situation, the board is also conducting regular batches of virtual concurrent course of banks in order to help the members to develop their skills and competencies in the field of concurrent audit and offer value-added services. I would request all of you to provide suggestions for improvement, and you would like all of you to participate in the activities of the board, specifically related to developing technical literature. I also encourage receiving your feedback and suggestions, as this may help in investing and channelizing our efforts in right direction and in improvising our strategy and its effectiveness. Lastly, I would like to add that our faculties are extremely experienced members of the Institute, having vast knowledge. I am thankful to them for taking time out of their busy schedule for the benefit of the members. They will surely guide you to understand the topic of the discussion. I urge all the members to post their queries so that our faculties may resolve them. We'll like to take the question answer session at the end. Now I have to perform the onerous responsibility of reading out the brief biodata or resume of the faculties. I start with Mr. Jamin Bhatt. Mr. Jamin Bhatt is the Group President and Chief Financial Officer of Kotak Bank. He is a commerce graduate from Mumbai University and cost accountant from the Institute of Cost Accountants of India and Chartered Accountant par excellence. Jamin Bhatt is the Group President and Group Chief Financial Officer of the bank and has over 35 years of experience in the financial sector, 25 years of which has been with Kotak Bank. In 1995, Jamin Bhai joined Kotak Mahindra Finance Limited in the proprietary investment before moving to investment bank. He did merger and acquisitions and handled a number of transactions. He was also given responsibility of primary dealer activity. Since 2003, he has been the Group CFO handling finance, tax, legal and secretarial. He supervised internal audit and corporate compliance earlier and now supervises operations and facilities. He has been felicitated as the Hall of Fame 2019 honored by CFO 109.9 Group. He is conferred with India CFO Award for Excellence in Finance over a decade by IMA in 2018. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India also conferred him with the ICA Award 2015 under the CS CFO Banking Sector category. His hobbies include Indian classical music and he is a sports enthusiast. Now I would come and discuss and just relate to you the brief profile of CA Balaji Ranganathan. Mr. Ranganathan is a certified public accountant from USA and chartered accountant and cost accountant of the Indian Institutes. Balaji currently heads the Indian operations of defined benefits for Fidelity Investments and has over 25 years experience in audit, risk management and managing operations. Previously, Balaji headed the corporate audit team in India with responsibility for developing and implementing the internal audit strategy and contribute towards building strong and effective risk awareness and control consciousness within FMR India. Balaji also spent 14 years with PricewaterhouseCoopers working in their offices in New York, Abu Dhabi and India. He also served as the chief audit executive for Source, a Luxembourg headquartered company which provides real estate, mortgage and asset qualities. He is a visiting faculty with so many reputed institutes and has a flair of public speaking and loves speaking on areas of contemporary interest. Now I come to Sri Satish Shenoy. Sri Satish Shenoy currently heads the corporate management audit function at the Aditya Birla Group with turnover of nearly 50 billion US, which has operations worldwide. He is a chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary, and diploma holder in Central Excise with 8th rank holder in final CS exams. He carries over 40 years of experience in internal audit, risk, forensics, and ethics functions in PSU and private enterprises such as Hindustan Petroleum, Onida, Lupin, Renas Litane, and L&T. Additionally, Satish has also worked with the Government of India Ministry of Petroleum on deputation with the Oil Coordination Committee. He is closely associated with ICAI, IIA, DCAS, ACFE, ICMA, trade bodies like SOCHM, FICCI, PhD. He is an avid cricket player and has special passion for driving and trekking. He is a great person. I know him personally and his love for the profession, particularly the internal profession, can never be undermined. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our Vice President who has to join us shortly. But what I suggest that we will have his words of wisdom after the session. So now I request my co-chairman, CA Prasanna Kumarji, for his vote of thanks. Prasanna Kumarji has been contributing immensely to the cause of the profession. He is a voice of the members and students from official towns. He comes from Visakhapatnam. Yet he travels so often to the council to ensure that all tasks are accomplished on time. Over to the
Yeah. Respect. Nandaji.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You want to speak now? I'll come at the end, for the vote of
Please, and also, sir, when there are so many dignitaries, you please speak. And then at the end, you give the closing remarks.
Okay. Respected CA, CS Nanda, Honorable Chairman of the Internal Audit Standards Board, and the speakers of today's session, CA Satish Shenoy, CA Balaji Ranganathan, Mr. Jamin Bhatt, and our Honorable President, CA Atul Kumar Gupta in absentia. He is in Salem now. And the Vice President who is going to join us for the at the end of the session, and my dear participants. Good evening to all of you. I too welcome all of you for today's webinar, which is going to address the stalwarts of the profession, who have done human service for the profession, particularly in internal audits area. So we are going to have a great benefit out of the deliberations today. I'm sure that both the Internal Audit Standard Board and the Committee for Members in Practice are doing human service for the benefit of the members, both in practice and in service also. So so many programs have been devised for enrichment of knowledge here by the Internal Audit Standard Board, and CMP is doing so many beneficial programs and enabling the members to do a great audit by providing the audit tools and many other things required for conducting the audit. So I am happy that I am the vice chairman for both the boards. for the Internal Standards Board as a committee for members in practice, both of us are joining hands together the first time. I think this trend should go so that to equip our members in practice more and more to do a great audit function, the assurance function to go. I have a great piece of learning today from the stalwart speakers. I'll join you at the end for the concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prasanna Kumar. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now the versatile speaker, the performer, Tejaman Bhatt. Mr. Bhatt, with his great experience, will take you through the expectations of banks from internal auditors, particularly small and medium practitioners. Over to you, sir. The dice is all yours.
Thank you, sir. I'll just use the screen. Just give me half a minute. Right. Sorry, Pallavi, can I request you to use to put it on the screen? I'll maybe go with that. Hello? Hello?
Sure, sir. I'll do it.
Yaman Bhai, by the time the screen is being shared, you can start with your opening remarks.
I'll do that. Yeah, fine.
I'll
Thank
do
you.
the screen sharing for you,
Fine,
sir.
thank you. First of all, Nandaji, it's a privilege to be here in the middle of all of you all. Talking to the institute itself is always a privilege. As the president mentioned, coming to the alma mater is indeed an honor, and talking to all of you all. First of all, I must mention that I am talking to a set of people on internal audit. I have not been an internal auditor, but as a finance function and looking at the finance function for some time now, have a fair amount of expectations from what the auditors and particularly the outsourced auditors would be expecting from. Banks to that extent are always special. And banks are special in a variety of manner. First of all, banks depend on the fact that you are dealing always in money. And dealing in money has its own set of control issues. You've got a host of people employed, internal, external, outsourced, and dealing in money with the controls there are extremely important. Second, importantly, banks deal in large volumes. So when you deal in large volumes, you always have the issue about making sure that your controls are in place and you're making sure that things are happening exactly as was planned. Thirdly, more and more things are getting complex. Gone are the days earlier when you used to borrow from the depositors and lend and make a spread. And that was your primary, almost your entire business. As things have evolved, more and more products are being offered by banks, and the complexity of all of the offerings are getting into a different state. To that extent, the requirement to make sure that your controls are in place is extremely important. And lastly, banks are extremely leveraged institutions. If you look at the traditional debt equity ratios, which we talk about, banks are legally, regulatorily permitted to go into debt equities of 10:1. That makes it a lot more vulnerable. So effectively, if 1/10 of your balance sheet goes into a situation where you have problems, the entire equity can be wiped out. And to that extent, the safety of the depositor's money is something which is paramount. The regulator is always concerned about it, and therefore controls and processes in banking becomes all the more paramount on this one. So if you look at, if I take the next slide, There are various levels of controls which are used. The first thing is people who manage the business and people who operate the business. The first stage comes in when you are designing the products and policies and setting up the processes. At that stage itself, you make sure that the processes are well defined and controls are put in the processes itself. You at times take help of outsiders to make sure that the processes and controls are put at that stage itself. While on the operating side, the management and the businesses itself then put in things like the risk control units within the businesses to ensure that on a day-to-day basis, the controls are taken place. At the second line of defense, you have people like risk and compliance. Risk would be a variety of areas of forms of risk, but the most important in this context would be people who do the operations risk part, making sure that the designs and the processes which are there are regularly tested. There is, of course, this mechanism of risk control self-assessment. The people who are closest to the thing, the businesses and the risk teams, will be able to tell you whether things are working or not working, and on a day-to-day basis give you an expectation of where things needs to change. And of course, there's a regulatory compliance department which then looks at making sure that things are happening as planned. And the third line of defense comes in the form of the internal audit teams. The internal audit teams making sure that they check out on a periodic basis as to what is happening on a risk in terms of what is risky and thereafter looking into it. Looking at the gap Can I get the next link, please? If you take the previous slide, please. If you look at the regulatory landscape, the Reserve Bank of India a few years ago effectively said that a lot of the internal audit needs to be in-house. So most of the banks end up having pretty large internal audit teams. However, a host of areas are outsourced out. You have co-sourcing, you have concurrent audits. There are specific niche areas where banks do look at going out for getting external help in the internal audit area. So the internal auditors who work with the banks do work very, very closely with the in-house internal audit departments of the bank itself. I take the next one, please. So within the bank, there is, of course, the audit committee of the bank. This is, of course, like in any other company, it is constituted and oversees what is happening in the internal audit department. The committee members here are, again, by regulation, all non-executive independent directors. You also have a requirement of the RBI that you necessarily have to have one chartered accountant in the audit committee. Typically, is the chairperson of the audit committee. The number of reports with the internal audit team and the outsourced auditors end up churning out during the year. Effectively, it would mean that putting all of that to the audit committee of the board becomes quite a task. So several banks, including us, have gone into this aspect of having a first-year audit committee, which typically is a committee of executives, senior executives of the company, including most of the times full-time directors, who go through every report, take corrective action, call for what is the rating of that, take action, including disciplinary action against people, talking about process changes and making sure that it's monitored far closely, and then only the exceptional items are put up to the audit committee. Can I take the next one, please? Basically, therefore, the audit activities involve drawing up a very detailed risk-based internal audit plan, reviewing the adequacy of that, the auditors and the FTSE as well as the audit committee, looking at what are the findings of the audit report. Several appointments, both internal, external, concurrent, outsourced, are reviewed by the audit committee and the FTSE. Performance of the internal audit department as well as the outsourced auditors are again reviewed out. And then, of course, you keep looking at what is the calendar and where are you headed versus the overall stuff. And again, these are more statistics from our end. The audit committee, as I said, apart from meeting for financial results, there's about 6 to 8 meetings a year only for discussing internal audit reports, which typically take about 5 to 6 hours per meeting. Before this meeting, the chairperson of the audit committee would spend time with the audit team for about 2 hours to just understand what are the issues coming up. And the first year audit committee, which I talked about as executive level committee, meets about 14 to 15 times a year, again spending 5 to 6 meetings. So about once in 3 weeks, there's a defined date when the FTSE will meet to look at what's happening around. So if you look at what are the control mechanisms, one is the internal audit area, who looks at business audit, branch banking, IT audits, vendor audits. This is something that the audit does, and then a lot of these areas it would look at working in tandem with the outsourced auditors, whether it is concurrent or outsourced. A big area which has changed in the last few years is the whole area of off-site monitoring. Just about maybe less than 10 years ago, a lot of the audit was done on site. So if you had to do branch audits, you would send teams of people to the branch and look at things. Today, with a lot more digitization happening, a lot more records available on the electronic means, a lot of audit area is being done through off-site monitoring. A lot of data can be looked at the head office, at the central processing centers, and where again use of technology comes important. And that's where things have changed quite dramatically over the last few years. And both the internal auditors and the external auditors use practices, look at each other, and making sure that it is giving confidence to the management that the things and the control processes are very much in place. I take the next slide, please. Next one. In a very recent discussion paper which the Reserve Bank of India put out, it looked at the importance of internal audit overall. It talked about the fact that internal audit is identified as one of the very critical functions of the bank. In fact, of the 4 control functions, internal audit was looked at as among the most critical functions of the bank. The others being risk, compliance, and finance. They've very clearly said that internal audit will be accountable only to the board or the audit committee. The head of the internal audit has to be necessarily somebody who is equivalent in seniority and only one level below the CEO or the whole-time director. So they expect the head of internal audit to be somebody who is an extremely senior person. He is required to report directly to the board or the audit committee. He does not report to any executive, not even a whole-time director. The nomination of the person or the selection of the head of internal audit, the compensation, the appraisal things, all of that are done first by the audit committee and then approved by the board. You have to appoint the head of internal audit for a specified term, and any premature removal of that has to be approved by the board and has to be publicly disclosed as to why you've done that, which effectively puts a lot of onus on making sure that you have a reasonably senior person there. And very clearly, the idea is to make sure that the audit is independent. Yeah, we can move to the next one, please. So if I look at where do SMPs come in, one of the big areas which banks use SMPs is for the whole area of concurrent audit. There have been a host of areas which are regulatory, and there are areas which are not necessarily regulatory, but banks do go in for concurrent audit to satisfy themselves, to comfort themselves that things are in order. So if I look at what are the RBI requirements, they have very clearly said that you have to have concurrent audit in a very broad area, and the whole area of making sure that the risk-based approach is followed is something which is insisted upon. There are a variety of areas where things like AML, money laundering issues, the end-use monitoring, when I've given a loan, to make sure that the loan is being used for the specific purpose for which it is intended, making sure that things that my own employees do not missell. All of these are things which go through a set of concurrent audit, which again is mostly outsourced out to the SMPs. But typically what most banks end up doing is appoint areas, typically and back for about a 3-year period to make sure that you have some learning and then you the benefits of learning as you go along. Help again in the last few years, as I mentioned, is stick to that slide, please. I'm sorry. So So in a host of areas, you are now seeing more and more of centralized operations. So, for example, we do something like 500,000 new accounts which are opened every month. All of this end up being opened at a central shop in Mumbai. All of this goes through a concurrent audit because you have to make sure that once you have allowed opening an account and given clearance, the customer can operate in that account. And if you have issues on KYC, it can come to haunt you. So the whole operations shop of opening accounts going through a regular audit almost every single day. Similarly, making sure that these accounts are maintained and operated well, which either happens at the central operations or at the 4 or 5 regional centers, which most banks end up having, are again going through a regular on-the-ball audit. What has changed very recently, this is as late as May of this year, where in the initial stage, a lot of banks were permitted to open accounts entirely through digital means. For example, we used to do that through our 811 app. So you could open an account entirely digitally and start transacting immediately. But there was a limitation there that you needed to get your physical documents verified within a 1-year period. Till that time, that account was having limited operations. So you still had to have the physical contact. What has been permitted now, and most banks started launching out, we did our launch in May, was the fact that video KYCs are now permitted. So you can have a bank official talking to you on video, just like we're talking right now, you showing the documents, the authenticity of that is verified parallelly, and there is a necessary requirement of having a concurrent auditor sitting beside you and signing off almost immediately before to say that your KYC is correct and the documents are authentic. So there again is a whole new area which is opened up, and this is a compulsory requirement of concurrent audit which is happening now. Similar to account opening, which is more on the liability side, there is also, when I lend money, disbursements happen from a host of hub centers across the country. Of course, now more are happening through hubs rather than at the branches. Processing happens at hubs, disbursement happens at hubs. Again, all of this is going through audit almost parallelly as the transactions happen. And again, a lot of this ends up being outsourced out. In addition to the volume operation, which is most of what is account opening and loan disbursement and all of that happens, there are areas which are either large volumes and stroke or very complex. For example, trade operations. These are people who import and export things, and a host of things involved with, including foreign exchange, making sure that the documentation is correct, they're meeting the whole FEMA regulations, a whole host of other regulations which are being met out. So that is happening at the trade shop. Again, large stakes involved, and most of that goes through either a full-fledged 100% concurrent audit, or at least make sure that a large part of it is concurrently audited. Similarly, there are treasury operations. Large amounts of money are moved in and out of systems. Sorry, just click to that, please. Are moved in and out of areas where you have foreign exchange involved. You can make exchange differences in the third decimal of an exchange rate. But considering the fact that the rates and the amounts involved are large, it can make a material difference. So again, most of this goes through concurrent audit, making sure that the rates are right, the issues about control systems are tested, any element of whether it's a fraud element or whatever is being taken care of at that level itself. The impact of even a third decimal change can have large implications. Then, of course, in addition to all of that, you still have some branches which you necessarily need to go through an audit. For example, there would be branches where you have large cash transactions. You will have branches where you suddenly see large transaction volumes happening. So you pick up those branches, again, not regulatorily required, but you pick up some of those branches based on your risk parameters and then employ people locally to go through an audit of those areas. For example, at our end, we have about 1,600 branches. Typically, about 5 to 7% of that are picked up for concurrent audit, and we keep rotating those 5 to 7 branches. And these are done by local firms at those levels. So there again, you end up using the SMP firms quite regularly in each of these areas. Can you go to the next one, please? So, in the whole area of concurrent audit, if I take the area which is apart from the niche area on concurrent audits, what happens is you take on specific area, and what one has seen of late, a lot of the SMPs end up appointing ex-bankers to help them with the area of audit so that they get the familiarity almost immediately. Most of the SMPs, if I keep moving, please, start with maybe branch audits, which is easier to understand because there is more deposit taking and regular operations happening there. But then they build up their expertise over a period of time, move to more complex work, whether it is analytics, and then develop into a lot of these subject matter expertise, whether it is trade, treasury, and then as they keep growing and they keep understanding what is happening, you can see them employing more cost-effective models to make sure that they operate well and kind of sit beside the management to give them advice. Can you move to the next one, please? In addition to the concurrent audit, there are a host of areas where the internal audit team looks at partnering with the outsourced auditor, and again, most of these would be SMPs, for doing audit on the side with them. A host of areas, for example, where we end up using SMPs for doing co-sourced audit would be areas like depository participants. Again, lots of volumes where we would do some of the work and then a lot of that will be outsourced to the external agencies. The whole area of vendor audits. A host of our work, for example, is outsourced to vendors. People who, let's say, print my checkbooks, people who operate my payroll accounts, who operate our share transfers. A lot of those also we have the right, and we insist on all the vendors going through an audit, and almost all of those vendor audits are done by outsourced firms. Again, most of them being SMPs who go and audit the vendor. The checklists are prepared jointly by the appointed auditor and the internal audit team. Then the work is actually executed by the SP, and that becomes a regular activity as such. Stock inspection, again, is a very, very important area. We lend against the hypothecation of the stock or book debts, and there are a host of firms now specialized in making sure that they regularly go and make sure that they give us comfort about the existence of stock, the value of stock, existence of book debts. They would give us signals about how old is the stock or how old is the book debt, and then kind of give guidance about what is the real valuation of that we should be taking out. Again, as I said, the red flags come from each of them. They compare with their findings with what has been submitted by the borrowers in their course of business, and what are the agreed covenants with the banks. For example, if I have lent to somebody to say, I will not finance a stock which has been lying with you for more than 90 days, or a receivable which is more than 90 days. This is again something which the auditor picks up and gives us regular feedback. Again, it puts the borrower on his toes because he knows that he's going to be audited regularly, and he then gets into a much more truthful statement as he goes forward. You go to the next one, please. One other area which we have been using auditors outside, the SMPs again, is the whole area of IT and controls. As banking becomes more and more complex, it is going to be far more an IT activity than anything else. And when you are handling those kind of volumes, making sure that your IT controls are of the top order is something which is paramount. And what one has seen over the last few years is a host of the mid-sized firms coming in and developing expertise in the whole IT and IT control areas, and today doing as good a work as we were earlier getting from any of the bigger firms. So the whole specialized area of IT and IT controls is something which increasing presence of SMPs have been seen. Similarly, a host of activities, banks again whether it is for their own staff or whether it is for borrowers, you end up facing inquiries about fraud, or you want to get into forensic audits. Again, you're seeing specialized firms building expertise in these areas, and they're doing a very good job in each of these areas. Then you have a host of areas, and of late, in this environment, every business, which includes banks, are looking for areas of cost reduction. And again, we've hired a few companies on our own. I'll give a couple of examples as we go forward. We've hired a few people who sit with us and try and find out where is it that we could look at saving cost. The whole area of procurement. Now, procurement is a big thing in the whole in a banking area. Project monitoring. We are setting up a big facility somewhere. How do I make sure that what is being spent there is clearly something which is what is being planned? How do I make sure that procurement is following processes, not just getting tenders, but having a smell test about everything is okay? So there again, we have auditors sitting and working alongside. A lot of the banks have a wealth management portfolio where you give periodic valuations and comfort to the clients about the valuations of their portfolios. Banking is a extremely regulated activity. So making sure that you are meeting your compliance, whether it is RBI regulations or any of the areas, is absolutely important, because stigma of a penalty may be small, but the stigma of a penalty is something which is looked down upon very much by the fraternity. So making sure that you're getting comforts about that all your statutory compliances are in place, again, is something which we have used. Maybe not all the time, but we kind of do rotation on this, that on a particular quarter, we would look at statutory compliances in one segment, maybe rotate it into another segment in the following quarter, and so on. But this has been an ongoing activity which you keep doing. The whole internal finance control area, which is a requirement of Clause 49. Again, we preferred, and a lot of them have preferred, rather than having our own internal audit team do it, to have this outsourced to people who have, again, expertise and being specialized in the whole area of internal financial control, making sure that what we're reporting is meeting the test of what is required under Clause 49 and beyond. Banks dealing with money, you have a host of whistleblower issues which keep coming around. Some of which, of course, we analyze on our own, but there are times when one needs to go beyond that and make some specific inquiries, including in the external world, where again, the outside audit firms have been of good help. Banks do run trusteeship companies, trusteeship services, so you end up having, say, hundreds and thousands of trusts where you are only acting as a trustee. All of these trusts need to get through their accounting work, the taxation work, and all of that, which again, most of this is outsourced out. The next one is an interesting thing which has been happening over the last few years. A lot of the Companies Act requirement is now putting onus on the independent directors to make sure that independent directors are comfortable, and there is increased pressure on the independent directors to take on the fact that everything is fine. Just to take an example, every quarter, a host of transactions on related party will go to the audit committee. Now, and again, this will include mundane transactions like deposits and others, but including some of the others which could happen with my subsidiaries and whatever. Now, most of the independent directors would not have the wherewithal or the time to say that, how could they verify that everything is fine, everything is arm's length and in the normal course of business, and you've got your documentation right. So most of the audit committee members would say, have this audited by a third party to give me assurance that what I am required to give comfort is something a third party independent person is giving me that assurance. So the related party is only one such example, but you have enough things which the independent directors are required to sign off on are things which they look for assurance from independent auditors. Process audits, which I talked about, where when we set up processes, we at times get specialized internal auditor teams who have done internal audit to give us some guidance about are we missing something. And thematic audits are something, again, for example, the whole area of non-performing assets. the whole area of priority sector lending. As we speak right now, the government of India has come out with the whole MSME scheme and the ECLGS scheme. So are we making sure that, we are doing what we are claiming what we can, not claiming higher than what we should be. So a host of that is a parallel thematic activity which is done periodically on select topics with the help of outsourced firms. I just wanting to take a few examples of how some of the firms which we have seen have grown with us. This is actually a firm who, a CA professional who used to be working in our team, in the finance team. He left and he actually joined a small firm where he had done his articles. And this guy, over a period of time, had done some work in the non-mortgage area. He built up his expertise in that. We gave him an assignment, and over a period of time, having built up expertise in that, is today doing that similar work for a variety of banks and now taking up more and more complex work. So he built up comfort from one area of expertise which he was comfortable with, and has then gone into a variety of areas. And today, my presumption is the whole BFSI sector would be a pretty large chunk of his revenues. In fact, my personal belief is the whole BFSI sector would, if I look at across sectors, would be the largest contributor of auditing and assurance revenues, which the CA fraternity would possibly end up making. Can I go to the next example, please? Now, this is a firm which is currently working with us. They started work in the whole trade finance area, which I mentioned is a pretty complex area, both in respect of volumes, complexity, regulations, and the products which are there, knowledge of the products. Now, they were given an assignment a few years ago to do a KPO work for a foreign bank which was operating overseas. They did that, picked up expertise, then they made a presentation to us with respect to what they could do in the whole area of trade finance and audit of trade finance. We used to have this done because of the fact that we believe trade finance is extremely complex. It is best done by one of the bigger firms. So for a long period of time, this was one work which was being done by a large firm for us. About 2 years ago, when we had time to rotate, and when this firm had made this presentation, we were impressed. We gave them this work, and honestly, they're as good, at times better than what we used to see earlier. And looking at that depth, we are very, very comfortable now of giving them further assignments in other areas, because they can then build up expertise in that area. And take the next one, please. Now, this is again by a couple, meaning a husband and wife who started out, first started with Mumbai, got a few assignments, expanded themselves into other areas, and now very, very niche area they've worked on. And they have now got offices in Singapore. For what I know, they're opening another one in Dubai, and expanding themselves to make sure that they, in the area of which their expertise is, they possibly now become the first port of call by most of the banking community. I'll give another example, which is not necessarily in banking, but in a related area which we operate in mutual funds. Most mutual funds who get money in and out have to firm up their NAV by about, say, 11 p.m., 12 midnight every single day. And a lot of this kind of is, while technology helps, a lot of this is verified and outsourced by an external firm. And there are firms who have specialized in this, and who that becomes a very large part of revenue for some of these firms. Can you take the next one, please? What is also interesting is having worked with banks, I do believe that, you can stick to that, please, that slide. Yeah, this is fine. Having worked with banks, it does give an opportunity for the audit firms to take up work with the borrowing firms, and it's a benefit for both the banks and the audit firm. And I'll take some of the examples there. A lot of the mid-sized firms who are into exports or imports are sometimes unaware of what are the intricacies of what is involved, what are the regulations, what are the benefits they can claim. There are times when they can actually claim subsidies. There are times when they can claim subvention benefits. But there are also obligations, like making sure that they give timely reports. If they do not, the bankers have a right to levy an extra charge. So somewhere, having done bank audits, if the firm can go and tap some of the clients, who then they can use that expertise to get some of the assignments there. Similarly, on the cash management area, a host of these smaller firms, again, making sure that they are getting the benefit of appropriate cash management services, they're reducing their borrowing costs. Otherwise, you will have areas where you have a cash credit account which is overdrawn, and you have some other account where you have money sitting idle and not being done. The whole forex area, as I mentioned, volumes are large, and any small difference can make a any small difference in terms of what the bank charges can make a difference. Again, once having done treasury kind of an audit in bank, you could actually know hedging strategies, and again, you could become an advisor to the borrowing entity to see how you can advise them on some of these activities. Again, from some of the areas again where the small businesses falter, they still prefer to write checks and whatnot. Now with net banking happening, their discomfort is, how do I share my password with my Munimji who can do anything? So he still prefers writing checks. How does that auditor give him comfort that you can build in checks and balances and controls, again, through use of digital means by using net banking also? So again, these are areas where not only the auditor benefits by having engaged with the bank, but once if the banker gets information from the auditor, I would say information is more in terms of processes and whatnot, it's an area where there's learning both sides, where even the bankers end up learning from some of the experiences which the SMPs have with dealing with this kind of firm. And that's something which even the bankers find pretty valuable. When it comes to selection of firms in a bank for audit, the most important thing which happens is quality. And there is no compromise on quality. And it is not that, people go to the SMPs for cost. Cost may be an issue at times, but it has to be accompanied by good quality. And there is no secondary guessing about the fact that you cannot walk into somebody's the internal audit head or the CFO to say, I know your director and therefore give me an assignment. It will always be, I would always prefer somebody who's looked at what we are doing, who has kind of studied what we are there, what are the areas which he can contribute. It gives me the comfort that he has spent time investing in me and having done his homework. It just gives me a lot more comfort about the fact that let's therefore try him out. So that's quality, and what you can do is extremely important. As I said, while cost is important, cost is not everything. You can always start building better cost as you build along. Locational presence important for SMPs because, as I said, you have your borrowers in variety of locations, you have your branches in a variety of locations, you have your hubs now, your processing centers across the country. One of the advantages we've seen with a lot of the SMPs is making that their presence across the country or in the tier 2, tier 3 towns makes it very, very important to kind of engage with them. Some of the SMPs, again, what I found is they take a broader view. If I've got a large firm coming and auditing there, the firm may be good in everything, but the team which is working with me has a very narrow view of what they are looking at. Whereas when I've engaged with an SMP, at least at the partner level or at the proprietor level, there's a more broader view and I could engage with discussions across. And the last one there is something which I really think is something which I would give a lot of credit to the SMPs. When you are engaged with a smaller firm, I could actually sense that there is a sense of propriety of that firm in dealing with the bank. They feel a sense of oneness. So if they find something wrong, they'll quickly come and say, look, there's something wrong here and we should look at it. And that sense of propriety as the smaller firm builds up dealing with a bank is something which most banks find very, very valuable, and building a relationship goes a long way there. You take the next one, please. So one of the other things which I keep looking for is you have to, the SMP has to then know who is the audience which is looking at. And you had cases even within the same firm, and there will be firms which are different from one bank, which is different from the other bank, and like any other client of yours. There are firms which prefer very detailed reports, whereas there are firms which prefer just synopsis. There are times when your report would be like a full-fledged report card, even when you're making a presentation to the audit committee, whereas there are times there are committees which prefer things coming in charts. So recognize who are you talking to, what is their preference, and tailor your things according to what the audience wants to hear, rather than, wanting to do a tailor-made thing as to what you want to put across. Another thing which is what I would look to the SMPs is, there are lots of times when they do a finding and then just keep it open for discussions. The advice would be try and achieve closures as early as possible so that it can then move on. Otherwise, you get into discussions, you get into a 95% certainty from both sides pretty quickly. The last 5% at times may not be really worth trying to polish out. My most important thing here would be red flags. When in your course of your audit, you will come across things which may be wrong. You're possibly, the mandate requires to give me a report once in a month. But if you found something which is really wrong, don't wait for that date of the report. Just do a flash and say that there is something wrong, requires immediate attention. The other thing, of course, keep yourself up to date. Regulations change, technologies change, making sure that you are updated. And if you have built that comfort, believe me, once you're there, your work will speak and you will get more. Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. Therefore, continuing on that, I would think technology is going to be the thing. So you have to embrace technology. There is no escaping that. Making sure that you have briefed yourself on the whole area of data analytics, making sure that you understand the IT. Even if you're not in the pure frontline IT audit, knowledge of IT is an absolute must. The other thing we've seen of late coming in is some of the SMPs are tying up with other SMPs either geographically. So you would have somebody doing well in a particular area in Mumbai saying that, look, I don't have a presence in Chennai, but I would have a tie-up with somebody who can work with me, or people tying up which are in different areas of expertise. Again, the last point again I would mention here is presentation skill. This is, I think, something which most of us CA end up having to improve. A lot of us, again, through the profession, are extremely sound when it comes to our substance. We know what we're talking about, we know the subject, but as we go forward, presentation of that and putting it in the right form becomes extremely important. And some of these areas which I keep talking to the SMPs is, polish up these skills, because it's not that substance is important. Form cannot substitute substance, but form is also important alongside substance. So again, if I go back to the next slide, sorry. If I go to what my request for the SMPs would be, to start with maybe an anchor client, making sure that when you build up at least one or two decent clients, have a symbiotic relationship with some of those anchor clients, build up expertise. If I have got comfort with you in a specific area, I would be more comfortable with you to allow you to expand into a different area. Whereas you could use the specialized area now to go and get business from somebody else. The last point in that particular box, extremely important for me, stand up to clients. You will find things which are wrong. You will find things which may be embarrassing to the management. But at the same time, stick to the fact that what is right is right. Do not get pressurized by management, because ultimately your job is to come up with what is right. And believe you me, at the end of the day, most managements, most audit committees will respect you for that. And there might be some initial friction, but at the end of the day, that is something which you're given the job for, and you have to stand up to that. I said, build up on your first assignments, work closely with the borrowers as well as among the fraternity, and go beyond the pure concurrent audits, whether it is consultancy, thematic audits, which are more value add, and there's enough scope of what we can do there. Collaborate with others and closing the gap on technology and specific skill sets. I go to the next one, please. That's my last slide here. Is, if I go around, I can see that in the banking area, Indians have reached the top. You have among the best banks operating in India. A large number of banks operating around the world have a lot of Indians at the top level. You go worldwide, whether it is New York, London, Boston, Hong Kong, Singapore, a lot of the fund managers, investment professionals end up being Indians. So Indians have that inherent knack of being good in finance, in accounting and controls. If you go to the big four again, you have a lot of Indians which are there. So if I just click the next one, please. So the whole thing is, we should aim at the end of the day to have an Indian firm getting into among the top firms there. And everything starts small. We should have aspirations, maybe through collaborations, maybe through tie-ups, but we certainly have all of what it takes here. Everybody starts small, but to get into a situation where we can make Indians and India proud through the expertise which we have built in. That's broadly all that I had to say. Thanks again, to everyone.
Thank you so much, Bhatt, for a very scintillating and mind-boggling presentation. I'm seeing both the honorable speakers also thoroughly glued on their screens, listening to your words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, again a great moment. We have our honorable Vice President C.A. Nihar Jambusaria, who hails from Mumbai. As I told you earlier, Mr. Jambusaria was busy in the Golden Jubilee celebrations of Salem branch. And today it was very important for Shri Jambusaria to come. The reason I'll tell you. Mr. Jambusaria heads the tax practice of Reliance Industries, the tax function of Reliance Industries. And all of the three of you are from industry. And therefore, for people in industry who wanted the top functionary of the institute, the to-be president of the next year, C.A. Nihar Jambusaria, to be here to speak to all of you. I am personally impressed by him. His skills, his thought processes, and his vision for the institute is really fantastic. Or if you use the right word, it is fantabulous. So, not taking much of your time, I take this opportunity to request our Honorable Vice President, C.A. Nihar Jambusaria, to kindly come and share his words of wisdom, not only with the speakers, but with the participants into the country all across, both the committees, the Interal Standard Board, and the Members Practice Committee, both would be greatly honored by your presence, sir, that I saw here.
Thank you, Nandaji. Good evening, everybody. Jaimin Bhai, Balaji, Satish ji, and all the viewers. In fact, it's an opportunity for me to come here and speak on a subject which is so relevant. In today's scenario, I was just listening to Jaimin Bhai's speech, and he very categorically repeated in the end that everybody wants that Indian firms thrive and flourish, and they present the quality that is expected of professionals, and they set an example in the world. And I think, see, big firms have all technology and everything at their disposal. But for smaller firms, I would like to only mention, Jaimin Bhai, that what you are expecting the institute is trying to get for the small and medium firms. The fact that we have a special SMP committee, this other committee which is jointly doing it with Internal Audit Standard Board is SMP committee, and Internal Audit Standard Board has organized this to empower SMPs and know what is expected of them. Today you were dealing with, I could not listen to the other speaker because I was held up in another meeting, but I was seeing what a bank would expect from an internal auditor and how a bank would be happy to outsource some of the functions of internal audit to an outside professional firm. At Institute, we are trying to do everything, like even we have a budget to have audit tools in place for smaller firms, and we have all sorts of training programs for them. And during these last 6 months, our members have realized that seamlessly, virtually, they can learn the best of the training, acquire the best of the training and upskill themselves. Probably about 6 months back, although we were always propagating that now be abreast of the technology, be hands-on with the new technology, have complete knowledge, know what a client is expecting, and focus on quality work. Compliances and statutory requirements are in their own place, but internal audit function is one which would expect a chartered accountant to really give value add to the client. And that is where I think all three of you will today talk and interact with the viewers as to what is expected of them. You have dealt with expectations of a bank. Then Balaji, I don't know whether he has spoken, but it is a case study on collapse of.
Sir, only Jaiman Bhai has finished now. Both the speakers have to speak now, sir.
Okay,
sir.
Then I will have benefit of his dispensation also. And Satish Ji is speaking on another very relevant subject, governance, risk, compliance. So relevant. And here it is not just ticking the boxes, but really delivering quality, because compliance has become so relevant today. And with clause 49 and everything that SEBI and the government expects that the corporate should satisfy, the chartered accountants have to see that the clients deliver, and if they don't deliver, alert them and guide them. So I think best of the programs committees are organizing, and here three stalwart speakers are there. I would like to listen to the other two and communicate congratulations to the two committees for organizing this much required program. And I would be benefited by the talk of the other two speakers. That is what I wanted to communicate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nihar Bhai, the Honorable Vice President of ICAI. Your words will act as catalyst to the membership at large so that they are able to build up good practices and come up to the expectations of the corporates and stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I request now Mr. Satish Shenoy. I request him to come and make his present. The dice is all yours, Satish Bhai.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Niharji, Nandaji, for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be back on the ICAI platform. Of course, I was speaking last Saturday as well for a different event. How much time do I have, Nandaji? I mean, it's 6:20 now. Till 7? Till 7 o'clock? Okay, fine. Nandaji, you're on mute. Nandaji, you're on mute.
Sorry, sir. You can speak up to 7:10 also, no issue.
Okay,
then
fine. Okay, fine. So I'll stop exactly at 7:05 because I'm also very keen to hear Balaji speak about the Wirecard because it's so much in the news and so much to do with control and the other things which, good evening to all. And it's a very vast topic. I don't have a presentation to make, but I'll talk out of my own experience because there's going to be so much of common sense which is required in internal control. I'm not going to get into definitions of what internal control is, what governance or what specific GRC is all about, what risk management is all about. I guess that is taken as a given. And even if that is not given, I don't think in 25 minutes or 30 minutes I'll be able to do justice. I would rather like to concentrate on specific examples and talk about the benefits of having a good internal control system and how we as practitioners, I'll keep it pretty simple and I'll be talking without jargon so that it reaches the heart of each one of the participants that are here. Now, when I talk about control, generally it has a very negative connotation. I mean, when anybody says that he's controlled or there are controls in any particular aspect, it gives a very something which says, "Arey yaar, why should I be controlled? Why should the system be controlled?" But as we look at the way processes are being built across banks, retail, manufacturing, mining, any business, it is the controls which actually make sure that the intended purpose of the business is actually done. Imagine if there is a process where there is no controls at all. Imagine we are doing this webinar and there's no control about who's going to come into the webinar, who's going to speak, how is it going to be defined, what is the platform that we need to use, and things like that. Imagine the chaos that would really be there. So therefore, when I talk about control, one very beautiful example is about a brake in the car. A brake in the car is actually, I think this example has been given many times, and I see Balaji also smiling. But a brake in the car is something which is actually a control, but it is something which actually makes you go faster. Would you dare to drive a car at 100 kilometers an hour if you knew that the brake is not there in the car? If the brake was not there in the car, you wouldn't have driven fast. So controls must be something like that. Something which is there to enable you to do something more, not something which is restrictive, something which constricts your performance, and so on and so forth. So understand controls from this aspect, that it is there, and it enables a better performance, a cleaner performance, a performance which is actually required the way it is intended to be. Controls have to be seamless. I'll give you some examples from the retail space. When we buy a particular item from a shop and when we price it, that is when we go to the billing counter guy removes what is called a tag, and he removes that tag and then scans it, and then the thing gets billed. While a customer is walking out, at the gate, there is a scanner which we don't even know about, but the scanner will ensure that if there is any item that is being taken out without actually getting scanned, then it beeps, and this becomes an issue for you to check out. And imagine if this was not there, how do you otherwise do a checking to ensure that there is no customer who's taking out items which he has not gone and billed? You would have to frisk the person. And imagine the frisking versus the seamless control that is there. So the controls must be built into the system in such a manner that the person who's actually going through the control doesn't even realize that there is a control. And I think this tagging at the retail store is one of the best examples that one can have about what a seamless control is. Controls also improve the information quality, because my talk is going to be based on what on specific processes as well as the view from the top. So from a perspective of from an information quality perspective, ensuring that there are good controls in the system will ensure that at the end of the day there will be a beautiful that the quality of the information that comes out of the system will be good. Material planning is another area which requires a hell lot of controls built in. At this point, I think I need to talk a little bit about manual controls versus automated controls. The more we have automated controls in a system, the better the system is going to work. The smoother the system is going to work. However, many times I've noticed that while designing a particular system, we will have lots of automated controls, but as we move along, we tend to dilute these controls and then do some workarounds. The best example here in this category of controls would be sharing of passwords. You would say that for having a segregation of duty, there must be A who will make that entry and B who will approve it. Invariably, you will find that, I didn't mean invariably you'll find several instances, or whenever we find something has gone wrong, when we go to the root cause by asking why, most of the times it is found out that when A made the entry, B was to post it, B's password was available with A. And this is these kind of things I've seen a lot in manufacturing. I've seen it in mining businesses, and I've seen it in retail as well. Store discounts, when we're talking about when we give when the store manager is entitled to give certain discounts over and above the normal discount, invariably sometimes the password is available with the guy billing it. Just because of the want of the fact that the store manager has to himself physically come and punch in his numbers. I've seen several cases, and not necessarily in my present employment, so that nobody gets a wrong impression about the group that I work for. But it's based on my experience. Various times, people overriding controls and getting into various kinds of issues. Flexibility is another very important aspect of internal controls. Example of this is that obviously when we purchase, there is a fixed quantity which we purchase. There is a does it mean that if we have purchased, asked for some 1,000 kilos of some particular raw material, only exactly 1,000 should come? There is a tolerance level. And that tolerance level sometimes is required because of dimensions, sometimes it is required because of packaging size, etc., etc. There is a little tolerance which is allowed in the system. If this tolerance is there, we must ensure as auditors that this tolerance is not being misused and it is there for a specific purpose. Any control that is being built into a system has a cost, and it is imperative for us to ensure that the cost benefit analysis is done, because we may have the best of systems, but if it is not going to serve the intended purpose, then there's no point in having such a rigid system. There are other dimensions about what a good control should be. A good system, a control system, should be able to point out exceptions. And I guess because of the huge transactions that are there today, because of the huge the data dimensions that are available today, because businesses are being done right across geographies, there is a need that, things happen on a continuous basis, but exceptions have to be reported and looked at. As auditors, I guess the very important thing is that we must start looking at what are the exceptions, how have they been handled. One other very important aspect which I feel that many times we in our audit, we do not give much importance to, is master data. Master data of vendors, master data of employees. You'll find many times I've found that there are cases of duplicate vendor codes because they've been created for a specific purpose. Vendor codes which are available at some other location of the business is not being used by this particular location. They create a new vendor code and it causes all kinds of problems. Many times there have been, debit balances available in one vendor code, credit balances available in some other vendor code, but we must have the ability to ensure that there is only one vendor code, that there is only one employee code, that there is only one material code. But this many times has been compromised. The other very important aspect of our particular work is to look at relational databases. When I say relational databases, I'll give you some examples where if we are doing an audit of vendors and we are looking at the payment process, or we are looking at the entire process of purchasing, it's very important for us to not only look, when we are looking at vendors, not only to look at the vendor database, but also look at the databases within the organization which has a relation to the databases. We as auditors need to compare the data of vendors with the data of employees to ensure that is there any common mobile number, is there any common address, is there any common, there's so many parameters, any PAN numbers which are common, the addresses which could be common. What does this really tell us? Because this will tell us that there are certain employees, and and God forbid, if that person is in the purchase department itself, or he is a buyer. So there is a very crucial need for us, very important requirement from our audit aspect, because if the control could be met, but then there is a different angle. Just if you are doing the payroll, if you are doing a payroll audit, imagine if we look at, because the attendance is a very important aspect of our payroll. If I'm doing a payroll audit, just if I look at the attendance records, because the attendance records could be probably be based in an HR system and the payroll could be in a different system. Has the payroll been met only after checking the entire attendance? When we do that, is there any employee? And today the beauty of doing audits is that if we ask the right questions to the system literally starts singing back to us. Auditing has now become, to my mind and my experience, asking the right questions, because all the database is available in the system. Gone are the days when we used to wait for the auditee to give us data and then we will start our audit. 80% of times, I'm talking about earlier times, 80% of the time went in actually just getting the data, just actual getting the data, and then there would be very less time available. The same 80-20, old 80-20 principle being applicable. We get very little time to do a proper analysis of the data. And this is causing lot of problems so far as conduct of audit is concerned. And that is why it is becoming very, very imperative that we have access to the data. No auditor in this world should do an audit unless he has access to the system. It's like a buffet food versus an a la carte. I know now going to restaurants is something that we used to do at least more than 6 months ago. But just to tickle the evening hunger, I thought I'll talk about the example of a buffet versus a la carte. We shouldn't be doing a la carte audits anymore. We should be entitled to look at the data in its rawest form, so that so that no data comes to us which is kind of massaged. This is very, very crucial according to me, and that is why. So coming back to the payroll, is there? So even Jaimin Bhai was talking about red flags. Whenever we are doing an audit, looking at red flags, and if we do a payroll audit, it's just today if we see employees like in my group, there are in excess of 100,000 employees. Now, how do we do this? Or for that matter, you take even now smaller organizations are also having number of employees or number of material codes. If you're talking about purchasing, if you're talking about selling, there are so many SKUs. If you're talking about retail, there are millions and millions of stock keeping units which are there. How do you do audit when there is such a huge database? And that is the reason why data analytics, which even the President Sab was talking about in his inaugural speech about data analytics. And that brings me to another point, because gone are the days when we could say that I did a 20% sample, I did a 30% sample, and get away with it. Even 30%, my friends, is such a huge number that, and today we have to do more for less. We are gone are the days when we could have a team which is an audit team. Of course, Jaimin Bhai's team in Kotak Mahindra Bank, I will excuse that. But gone are the days when you could have 50 people or 100 people or 200 people in an audit function. And therefore, technology is becoming something that one needs to use and needs to actually make sure that the controls are actually looked at. So if I don't want to do my audits based on samples, then I have to use technology. I have to look at the entire database. It's not enough for me anymore to say that, I looked at 20% transactions and I really worked out that, on this basis, this is my findings and things like that. So therefore, it is that comes. If I have to look at some other, I'll give you some other examples. if I'm doing an audit of payments, I mean, just looking at payments being made to vendors. One important question that we must ask, besides of course looking at duplicate payments and things like that, which are available as standard queries when we do a data analytics, there is something called an alternate payee. An alternate payee. That means you don't pay the person to whose name is available on the purchase order, but we ask there is an alternative payee. Most of the systems which have been developed do have this provision, because this provision is required because if there's an escrow account or if there's specific circumstances under which we need to kind of make a payment to somebody else, then this activity is required. Whenever there is some wrongdoing, and then we go back and find out what actually happened. We come out with the reason that somebody exercised that option of alternate payee, and the whole process, the whole internal control, which we relied so much on, we thought that our life depended on the internal control that are available, and therefore nothing can go wrong. But somebody has realized that there is this alternative payee which I can use, which can be tweaked out. We also now have simple things like, when there is a quotation, there is one vendor giving multiple quotes. And I think this is an audit classic. It's a full toss for an auditor. But things are becoming so brilliant. And because the use of earlier people used to give handwritten quotations and things like that. But nowadays, it's because of the technology that is available, because you can simply make letterheads. Earlier the letterheads used to be like a prized possession in the drawers, in the locked drawers of a very few people. But today letterheads have disappeared. All letterheads are almost like soft copies, and you could print letterheads, and with the available technology, you can just make letterheads. So we have to become that much smarter to be able to actually look at this particular aspect of payment. I'll give you another brilliant example of how people have broken internal controls. We have this thing that we must have 3 quotations, and we must have all these kind of typical internal controls. And we think that we have made a nice, beautiful comparison sheet and things like that. And there are 12 signatures on this. And payments are actually, and the purchase orders are being placed. We had done a particular study of some data in one of the companies that I worked for. And, if it's a public sector, there is a way in which quotations are received. There is a date by which a person has to give it. There is a date and time. These quotations have to be dropped in a box, and there is like a funfair ceremony. The tenders will be opened in public view. Public view means those who want to actually come, and interested parties are available. And then it is opened and sealed in sealed covers and things like that. But most of us are actually, getting quotations on emails, and and sometimes I shudder to think how easy it is for a person to actually, who gets this quotation, to actually know the price that is being quoted by some person. And when we did a study of some millions of purchase orders that have been placed, and we found the timing of when this particular quotation came, and how many of the purchase orders were placed on the last quotation which came. That means somebody quoted at a particular time in the morning, 10 o'clock, somebody quoted at 12 o'clock, and somebody quoted at 4 o'clock. Because the quotation was supposed to come by, say, today, by 6 p.m. So how many of these purchase orders which were finally issued were issued to the person who quoted last? And you don't require any intelligence to say that why this must have happened. And that is why it is important that auditors are not just satisfied with the internal control system that is devised, and suffice to say that yes, internal control system exists, it is reliable, it is working at all times, at all places. but the ability of auditors to ask these kind of intelligent questions, which suddenly then throws up so much of, different aspects of how people can beat internal control. We were doing a audit of a particular location, or let me say a retail store. We were doing an audit retail store, and we went to the store and asked for and looked at the inventory, and we had a particular technique of looking at of finding out which items we actually pick up for stock taking. And when we did that, we found that the inventory was more or less okay, and at some point in time, a very brilliant auditor just said, why don't we just look at the stock in transit, which is actually sent out by the particular store, because the store can do store-to-store transfer of inventory. And when we looked at that, we found that there were, for some very typical items, there were lots of stock out transactions. That means the store inventory was reduced because there was a movement shown as goods went out of the store. And it didn't take us too long for us to realize, because when the item went out, it couldn't have gone walking, right? There would have been a document. There should have been a particular transporter involved with actually picking up the goods. And there would have been an entry at the gate. And there were so many other circumstantially things that one had to simply apply common sense to be able to understand that there was in fact no stock moving out of the store, but there was something done in the space to ensure that the book stock is depleted, so that when auditors come for doing physical verification, the book stock and the so there are various things so where does this actually lead us to as internal auditors? It leads us to say that there is a very important need for us to look at look at the system completely. And at this stage, I must confess that, earlier we used to do lots of transaction, what we used to call a transaction audit. Suddenly came a phase where we said that we must do only systems audit. Enough for us to just look at the system, and we looked at the system is fine, the system is working, and therefore it's a clean report, or there are these few exceptions for which there is a reply. I think now the time has come for us to look at the system, no doubt, but look at it thoroughly, and also do some few transaction check to ensure that we do both 100% verification, but also what I call auditing in depth. So this particular auditing in depth, I think, is now again showing up and showing its face up in internal audit, and a good blend of systems audit coupled with auditing in depth, I think, will give us fantastic results. It will give us something which today, as CA practitioners, as even Y practitioners, even as employees of the company, I think the general level of intelligence has become so high. Every single person is competing with the other, and there is so much of brilliance. If there's nothing like now today which has become niche. Anything which becomes niche, there are players who understand what this niche is all about and get into that specific business. So what will make us stand out from the crowd that is available? So what makes us stand out is that what unique observations we come out with, what unique skill sets that we have, and the emphasis not only on accounting and accountants. Of course, I'm speaking at an ICA forum, I'm aware of that. But I must say that it has become very important for us to have a good blend of accountants, of engineers, of IT specialists, so that what happens is we get an all-round view of the business. The other important thing which sometimes I feel, and beginning with me, I'm not talking about others, I'm saying even this about myself, is the business knowledge. Many times we get we get high marks for the quality of work that we do so far as our accounting is concerned, so far as our knowledge of accounting processes is concerned. But there have been deficiency in understanding the nuances of the business. And I guess, and working in a very diversified group such as the Aditya Birla Group, there are so many businesses, and it's very imperative. It's imperative. I think it's become there's no compromise in this. We must understand the business in which we are operating, and understand. And also, the one other thing that I think internal auditors have is the experience of working across industries, of having the ability to do benchmarking, not only from my own industry, but benchmarking processes which are applicable in other businesses as well. If I look at my own self, I have so many opportunities to talk about something which is good happening in one unit, not only the bad, because bad talking, I think we as auditors have become experts now. So not only the bad part, I'm talking about the good part as well. We have the ability to understand how a particular business has handled a particular situation, and how it is possible for us to kind of take that learning from one business and give it to the other business. And the benefit of these things are that, yes, if you have got some 10 chemical plants in my group, then the learnings from one chemical plant can at least 100% get replicated in the other chemical plant. And for that, we need to have clear understanding of the process. And I guess when we look at why am I saying this now? Is because when we think that when we are doing an audit, if I concentrate on looking at the controls, I will definitely need to understand the business process completely. So the point about relational databases, I can give you a couple of more examples before I talk a little bit on compliance. We were doing an audit of a payroll of a company, and there were so many thousands of employees who were getting paid. And we also looked at, there were some allowances, some car allowances that a person could claim. And that was situated in a different database. All I told my person to do was look at the database of the person's claiming allowance and look at whether he got paid or not. Believe me, we got some examples of people who have claimed allowances but not got salary. Now, how is this possible? This became, as we looked at, I mean, first of all, it should have been zero. But when we got a few cases, we realized that the person had left the company, but unfortunately, the allowance activity was not closed. He had the ability to make his voucher, and these vouchers were vouchers without any supporting, and it is to just get paid. And therefore, what happened was that the system was was working, but some particular control was given the go by. Of course, the company then strengthened the entire process of separation and made sure that this aspect also was closed. Stock in transit was compared with freight outwards, because as I said, for every stock transfer out, there has to be a transportation cost. And we found many examples where the stock transfer was there, but it was not accompanied by any freight expenses. Inventories, physical verification of inventory has, I think, and both of physical of inventory as well as assets, has transformed from what I used to see earlier versus what is there now. But physical verification must not be done as a routine activity, and any discrepancies there needs to be solved there and then. So I've got a small list of activities for small businesses. What must be done so far as smaller businesses are concerned. Smaller businesses must realize that the business and personal finance accounts must be separate. No, it's not possible to kind of mix them up. Background checking of employees. Why only for small businesses, even for big businesses? Background checking of employees is becoming a very big internal control, so that we ensure that people getting into our business, into our companies, have been referenced well enough. Job rotation is another aspect of very super control which is required, especially when there is a huge dimension of transactions which have financial implications. Unless and until job rotation is there as a policy, it becomes very difficult for if you see the Punjab National Bank, it's because the same person was there in a job. And when did it come out? It came out probably when he was on leave. I don't want to get into that particular transaction. Maybe Balaji will be able to throw more light when he talks about his Wirecard, which, I'm slowly, as I see the time, I'm slowly getting more anxious to hear than speaking. But job rotation is one of the very important aspects that come out. And then we realize, oh God, this guy has been there in this job for the last 6 years or the last 8 years. And there is a familiarity between him and the vendors, between him and the bankers. And everybody looks at him and says, okay, yaar, kar do, those kind of things. Inventory control systems have to be set up very properly, and physical verification has to be done. The point I'm making here is, while physical inventory, we used to actually go and do physical inventory. Today, use of drones and use of technology to ensure physical verification is definitely there. Segregation of duties, the SOD conflicts is something which is again needs to be done. There are tools available to ensure no one person should have an end-to-end view of the transaction in the system. Because if that is there, then there is an ability on the part of that employee to tweak the system in the way in which it can favor him. Wherever financial duties are there, it must be available with multiple employees. I think that is one very important aspect. As auditors, I guess as I'm coming towards the end of my delivery of what I had to say, we as auditors should never be predictable. कि भाई ये आदमी आ जाएगा and he's going to ask these 10 questions for which I already have the answers. Even if he doesn't ask me the question, I've seen them asking, अरे साहब ये time आपने ये question नहीं पूछा है. So that's the problem about predictability. That's at times we become very predictable, and he says 10 साल से मैं auditors देख रहा हूँ और same question पूछ रहे हैं. So we must be innovative. What is going to keep what is going to make firms what is going to make companies look at firms differently is what new they bring to the table, what different they are able to do. And those things will only come by not asking the same questions, So that is the other aspect of it. From a governance perspective, I'm sure, there's not too much of time for me to talk about governance, but of course, Clause 49 has brought so many aspects of governance, independent directors. All these are steps in the right direction to make sure that the system is robust. On the compliance front, I just need to say that India is for everything we feel that it is. Once we legislate, then the problem is solved. But legislation comes with its own issues. And the compliance part of it becomes hindrant. We say one window, but that one window has several sub-windows. One window clearance and one window, come to Uttar Pradesh, come to Maharashtra, we clear the projects in 48 hours. These are the statements which are being made. And compliance is one more thing which is very important. Please make sure that we have a compliance system in our companies that we work for or we do audit for. We have a robust compliance management system. The compliance management system should be having a good database. So when somebody says, yes, I have filed the return, somebody sitting in, say, Guwahati, and I'm taking Guwahati just from a perspective that came first to my mind. I could have said Mangalore because that's where I belong, but I just said Guwahati as an example. So if my business guy in Guwahati says, yes, I have filed the local sales tax return or the GST return, and so on and so forth, he should. There must be an ability in the system for him to upload the particular document. If he says he has paid the particular amount, then that particular challan should be actually uploaded in the system, so that somebody sitting who's monitoring it at any location is able to see it. This will help, and any compliance which is not done. So there are so many compliances which are there. So the company has to definitely mark out those compliances which are no compromise at all. These things have to be done. And please concentrate on those compliances, because those compliances could then become showstoppers. There are compliances around tax payments, there are compliances around weights and measures, there are, if you're in a cement industry, your packaging, standard packaging, 50 kilo bags, cannot weigh less than X amount because there's a tolerance there. And those things become showstoppers. Your MRP, your MRP printed on our boxes versus what we bill them for, and so many other aspects which really come up. We must make sure that we do not falter on it. So the aspect which Chairman Bhai also was talking about, and I said this last Saturday also in the other seminar webinar I was talking about, is the ability of auditors to understand the expectation. And I was very happy to see the slide which had come up about expectations, and we must have the ability to understand what the other person wants and accordingly design our output. So there is something which I very simply explain called the expectation gap. If this is what we are expected to do, and we are doing that much, but we are doing it in this space. So what happens here is that this part of the expectation which somebody had me to do, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing exactly the same quantum of work which I was expected to do, but only thing I'm operating in this space. So this part of my job, this part of the work is an unfulfilled expectation. This part of the job which I did is, you did it for whom? You did it for somebody who didn't want you to do it. Unfortunately, this part is not static. That is also revolving. And this part is what you are anyway doing. And the ability of a good auditor, a good firm, a good person, a good human being, and this is not only applicable to an auditor, an auditee, or a board, but also in our personal lives. So long as we are able to do what we are expected to do, and we are able to meet the expectation, I think we'll end up being good human beings, and good human beings make good auditors. I think that is the aspect of it. The last thought that I want to leave auditors with, and I've been in audit for a long enough time to understand that there is so much of negativity around our role, but we must not concentrate on those negative points. We must be having the ability to convey even the most negative points in the most positive manner. What is said is not as important as how it is said. I can ask a person to get out of the room by simply getting ferocious with him, but there are other ways which I'm sure all of us have used to get the same effect. So it's exactly 7:05 now, as Nandaji had said. Even though I can't see his eyes, I'm sure he's glaring at me if I overstep. But Prasannaji is here. He's of course smiling, but I'm sure he won't allow me to go beyond this. We are all keen to, of course, hear Balaji as well. And thank you, Jaimin, for setting the context, and thank you, Balaji, for the last part of it. and I hope I have been the good filling in between the two wonderful slices, top and below. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So always there is sweet something between the top and below, So it has been a very sweet session by you. It was very interesting, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. The friends, now we have got CA Balaji Ranganathan. I know he is a very great speaker, but today I came to that he's a very good listener also. Though he's a speaker, when the other speakers are speaking, as if like all of us are viewing, he was also enjoying the entire session. That is very great of you, Balaji Ranganathan, sir. Very much welcome you. So over to you for deliberating on what internal auditors can learn for the collapse of Webcast. Friends, I am happy to announce, but today the topics chosen are so good for the SMPs, and the speakers are so eloquent. Speakers are speaking. The viewership today is close to 3,000.
Wow.
Close to this is a very good number by any standards. We're very happy that so many members are getting the benefit out of the deliberations today. Thank you very much. Over to CA Balaji Ranganathan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prasanna. And, a cricketer in the 90s, right? When you have a Sachin Tendulkar and a Rahul Dravid, who've just set the stage, and they've and then you're the 3-down batsman. All the heavy lifting has been done by these stalwarts, and so as somebody who's come in next, you have to just make sure that you don't let them down, and you want to make sure that you get to a sizable total, right? So that's what I'm going to aspire to do. Again, also I have the unenviable task. Today is the first match of the IPL, CSK and Mumbai Indians playing, and I'm going to be in between that and and dinner for a lot of folks, right? So but I think the good thing Mr. Prasanna said about me listening to these stalwarts, and again I've written notes and notes of I think the information that was shared I think is beautiful, right? As auditors, others, and I feel as an auditor, that's the best thing, right? Where we share and collaborate, and how we learn from each other, and how we make each other better, right? So that's what going to be the focus of my session. So starting with a little bit of an introduction has already been done, but I just would want to start with maybe one disclaimer, right? I mean, it's always easy. Hindsight is 2020, right? Like when you're talking about frauds and all that kind of stuff, it's always easy to point fingers, but you also have to understand that there was another auditor who made a judgment call that went wrong. I have spent 25 years as an auditor, and I've worked on several, I used to be, in the Adelphia Communications, one of the largest cable companies that went bankrupt. I was an auditor there. The infamous Satyam case, I was an auditor there. Several, each one comes with a lot of learnings. And, when you spend 25 years as an auditor, you learn a lot of things, and you also want to understand what's going in the industry, and kind of learn from that. Interestingly, now after 25 years as an auditor, now I'm actually running a small business for Fidelity Investments, our defined benefits business. And what's interesting is now I'm getting audited like crazy, right? So I feel like karma is catching up with me, and auditors are keeping me honest, and and it's been good. Because I service a lot of large customers, and there's a lot of work that we do, so I having somebody done an audit for so many years, I want to make sure that I'm respectful with the auditors, use them the right way, be transparent, honest, and share and collaborate with them. Obviously as auditors, the intent is, especially as an internal auditor, which is what this whole topic is about, right? To strengthen your organization and help business issues, right? And it's always great to have another pair of eyes which are looking at us, and and in a respectful way, telling us what we need to do. And like Mr. Jalman said, right, stand up to your clients, right? And that's a very, very important aspect, right? In terms of, your work standing up to yourself. And I feel it's very, very important in terms of the work that you do and, how, it's going to help transform an organization. So going into that, so let's start with, so we're talking about the Wirecard fraud. I teach, as in addition to being an internal auditor in my past life, I also teach in some of these business schools. I do a lot of case studies with, these IAMs, and, we always, it's important, what I enjoy out of those interactions. We pick a case study and we say, what went wrong with these companies. And we have a very interactive session with with the students, and a lot of these guys are going to come into the corporate environment, right? And they're going to be in various roles. And one thing that I emphasize with them is it's not just an auditor's job, right? You have to make sure that everybody understands what their role is, and how can we prevent some of these bad actors from creating havoc to these companies, right? So we'll start about Wirecard, and this is kind of the latest of the scandals that we've seen. They just filed for bankruptcy, but if you see the history of the company, it's a German payment processing company. They are into these electronic payments and transaction services. Very, very successful. It was one of those great companies in Germany, and and they made it into the DAX index. DAX, for those of you that don't know, it's the top 30 companies stock exchange, right? So it's a big deal, pride of Germany, and company doing extremely well. Again, very, very high profile CEO, and growing leaps and bounds. And now what I want to do with, this is, what did we know? And, what were the signs, were there signs, it's always easy to see, when failures happen, the first question is, where were the auditors, right? And that's an easy question to ask, and saying, how come they were signing these financials for all these years? How come they didn't find? And there is some level of responsibility. I wouldn't say that, as an auditor, you do have the responsibility to identify fraud, and which is what we're going to see some of these signs, right? And, Satish talked about, when you're doing an audit of a factory, and then, you do 10 other factories, you learn from something from one that you try to apply to the other, right? And, which is, as an auditor, right? What you learn in one particular, fraud, you want to kind of understand, introspect. He also talked about, the PNB situation, right? And that's a great example. He talked about automated versus manual controls. And that's a classic example, right? If you look at what was the underlying elements of the PNB issue that happened, they have a Finacle, is their accounting software, which, does their bookkeeping and record keeping. And they have the SWIFT system, which is the banks use that as a system to transact information between them. And Finacle and SWIFT were not integrated. They had a manual interface that was doing it, so people took information from that and posted it here. And, we talked about automated control versus manual control. If you had that automated feed, you would have ensured that that particular branch were reflected in the financials, and at some point, the risk management systems would have come into place. Unfortunately, in that case situation, it was being done manually, and we talked about, where job rotation, didn't happen, and, this guy has been working for a long time in that role, kept, falsifying this information, and it, ultimately when, that individual went on leave or, holiday, and, that's when this whole thing came out. I think he was close to retirement as well, right? So that's what, in fact, when that came out, and, there was also another major SWIFT scandal that happened in the Bangladesh bank. There was billions of dollars that got, tried to be swindled, but they tried to get most of it back, but, there's still some amounts of money that, they've lost. So for me as an auditor, when I saw those things, we actually use SWIFT as well, right? In, just to give a background, Fidelity, our assets under management is about $3.3 trillion, and, assets under right? I mean, that's much higher than the GDP of our country. So when you're dealing with volumes, that kind of volumes and every day billions of dollars getting transferred, and, as an auditor, these are the things that keep you up at night, right? And when you're using the same system and, you've seen some other, people having issues, those are the times you go in and you look at your systems and say, hey, what's going on? Do I have some of these issues? I think if you look at the Bangladesh bank situation, I think some user credentials which were not used in the past, and there were some dormant accounts, those were used. Usually you'll know who are your base, and a lot of times we ignore some of these things, right? Satish also spoke about a situation where an employee left, but his ability to claim expenses had not been removed in a system, right? When you hear things like that, it should ring a bell. Oh, wow, I should check if I have the same thing going on, right? So when we looked at the right, they had certain dormant accounts with login credentials which were not terminated. These were people who probably had a role at some point and they had moved on. But, those were used by the hackers to get into the system and, trying to hack into it and all that, right? So it's always good. And that's the kind of, the intent of sharing some of these things, in terms of Wirecard as well, is to what can you learn, right? And so let's move on. So if you look at, I picked all this information from the Moody's report from August 2019, right? It's less than a year ago, and this is what Moody, again, I don't want to put them on the spot or anything. They're a great rating agency. But at that point, if you look at what Moody's thought about, about Wirecard, they're saying, it's a great company, leading market share, revenues are growing at, compounded rate of 35%. Great EBITDA margins, in financial services, 27% margin is just great, cash generation. They had a well diversified customer base. They had customers all over, the world. They were expanding. It started as a European company. They acquired, one of Citi's subsidiaries. They acquired something in China. In fact, they had, they were doing some work in India, Dubai, Singapore. So they were pretty much, all over the globe, doing all these kind of, money transfers. And growing at a very, very, very healthy rate. And, Asia Pac was a big market for them. And, with Asia's growth, people are saying, with digital payments coming in, this is the company to be. And that was kind of reflected in their stock performance as well, right? If you look at, this is the stock performance from 2018 to 2020 and the eventual fall, it almost it's headed to zero. But you'll see the stock price, right, going up and, each time, they were hitting new highs and there were the company, right? And so it was, it's always, and everybody were giving the thumbs up and, and then, finally it all came to an end, when KPMG came and said, they were doing an audit, Ernst & Young were the kind of auditors of the company. KPMG was doing some special work. And eventually the company came out and said, there's about $2.1 billion in cash that's not there in the books. And, it was a huge shock and, everybody's wondering, how did this fraud go on for so long, right? So that's kind of the stage, right? And I want to show some, it's always when something like a Titanic sinks, right? And then you're saying, who was on the board of the Titanic? How did he not see the iceberg? And, what were the signs? And what can you learn from this? And how can you prevent disasters like this from happening in the future, right? And we're going to see, what were the early signals, right? What could we have seen, there were a lot of, things that came out and, is there an opportunity that, we as auditors, can we learn from this? And, tomorrow when we are doing an audit, what can, we do differently once, we learn from this particular episode, right? So the first thing I wanted to kind of, I just picked this from Wall Street Journal. I just looked at their financials for the last several years, right? And, wanted to see how does that look like, right? And if you look at the revenue numbers, 2019 is only 9 months, all the other years are full years. you'll see that the company is growing at a healthy rate. From 2014 they start with almost $601 million, and now it's almost $1.9 billion, right? I mean, that's just a 9-month figure for 2019. So they've been consistently growing. You can see each year, 35, 45%, 33%. So they've grown significantly, right? And then also if you look at some other interesting things is, the cash balance, right? If you look at it, as per 2019, they almost had $3.2 billion in cash, but they also have a lot of debt. So then you want to wonder, okay, if you have so much cash, what are you doing with the cash? You also have a lot of debt, is there an option for you to net them off, stuff like that. But you also see the cash, kind of growing, every single year, right? And also what's interesting is, the gross income, right? It's for the last several years, if you add all that gross income, it almost comes to, about $2.4 billion, when you add them all up, and net income is about $1.5, billion, right? Now, when you know what you know today, that, $2.1 billion, in cash, I mean, these are, maybe a little bit higher. If you say 2.4 billion, euros, it was the net margin for the last, 6-7 years, and, $2.1, billion is missing. Pretty much, the company never made money, right? So which means, they've just had all these financial transactions. I don't think it's a sham company because they had 5,000 employees. They were doing something. They were transferring money all over the place. But if you look at it, literally it was something that was not making money. So this is not a fraud that happened today. It's a fraud, that's happened over a period of time. So when you look at some of these numbers, it would just lead you to say, okay, when a company is growing every year like this, when the margins are healthy and, all that, we as auditors, is there a need for us to say, okay, can I go understand, Satish talked about it, right? Understanding the economics of the transaction, right? Why is things happening a certain way and stuff like that, right? So that's fair, like $2.21 billion missing in cash. And as auditors, it's the easiest, I probably should, it's not the easiest thing to audit. I mean, it's cash is, in different locations and, stuff like that, and like, even in the Satyam, situation where, cash was missing there. Almost 5,000 crores were missing. And, I think if you look into, what we saw in the courts and all that, it looked like the Ramalinga Raju just forged those bank statements, right? Like, he just, and why did that happen? Because the auditors, sent bank confirmations. It never came back to them. So they relied on him to get, not him, but somebody, in the finance department actually got those, and those were fraudulent statements. And, in fact, that was such a cleverly disguised fraud that they paid taxes, on so it was, it is when you're an auditor, those are things that really, but again, a simple thing like getting bank statements directly from the bank and, and making sure that, you look at it. And, in fact, there was a, fraud when I started my career in 1996. It was called the Barings Bank, and it was the oldest bank. It was a 230-year-old bank that went bankrupt because this guy called Nick Leeson, a rogue trader who took the bank down. And in fact, as an auditor, there's a book called The Rogue Trader. I would highly I always recommend my teams to, read the book. It's written by the guy who actually committed the fraud, right? And in fact, there's a beautiful paragraph in one where, the auditor has sent an account confirmation. And then she's talking to, this guy, Nick Leeson, who's done all this fraud, and she's trying to understand the economics of the transaction, and, he's trying to give her some crazy sense, and she doesn't understand, right? And then she asks him again, he gives this, crazy story, and, she's a little bit, confused, but she says, what, it's okay, so Nick Leeson is there, in the book he writes, he says, she thought if she asked for the third time, the auditor would feel that, this guy is going to doubt my, intelligence. And she, just bought, a story he bought, so again, going back to, what Mr. Jalman said, right, stand up to your clients, right? I know they pay our fees, but, it's important if you don't, as an auditor, after I read that book, I've gone into meetings where, somebody explains something to me and I've made him explain 3 or 4 times. And then, the third time I'd say, guys, sorry if I'm being stupid, it's okay. I'd rather be stupid now than, standing before a judge at some point trying to, explain something, that I didn't understand and signing off on something, right? So it's important to understand the economics of the money transfer. When $2.1 billion is in cash has been missing, or it's not even missing, it was never there in the first place. That's what the Bank of Philippines said, right? So that means they've had this going on for a long period of time, and obviously there has been faults. I'm sure as this case unravels itself, you're going to see a lot of learnings. But the point is, this was not something that was done yesterday. It's had a long time, going. And so this is where, when you look at, something like a cash or securities, and Mrs. Shenoy talked about, doing physical verification, similar thing, right? With cash balances, or bank balances, you want to get direct confirmations from them. Securities, you want to get directly confirmation from their, the custodians and, depositories to, what are the securities held, and are they the beneficial owners? Is this pledged? Is it, all that kind of stuff. Because the liquid securities are the easiest one to commit frauds with, and it's important as an auditor we understand what are the risks with the money and ensuring that it's all addressed, right? And the other thing which was interesting in the Wirecard case is, right, there's a lot of external signals, right? See, a lot of times as auditors we are so internally focused. We look at what's going on in the company, and it's important, right? We want to understand, the control environment. We want to understand, the management credibility, who are the people doing everything and all that. That's very, very important. But it's also important to understand what's going on outside and, what are people thinking of it, and, what are, the external signals, that's out there, right? In this particular instance, in February 2016, there was one of these short selling firms had a report saying that, there was a lot of fraud going on, that they were doing money laundering and all that. Rather than kind of paying attention to this, a lot of times, the German regulator actually, went after the short sellers. I know, you can't always, rely on the short sellers report. Obviously they are there to make money, but it's also important to kind of understand, what is in these reports, and, is there any credibility to it? And in fact, one of the very recent scandals that came out in March 2020 was this company called New Medical Center, in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, a huge medical conglomerate that, came, they declared about $4 billion in debt, and, that didn't previously get disclosed. Again, stock price went from almost like 28 pounds to almost zero. Again, that was also bought by this a company called Muddy Waters. They are a short selling firm. They brought out some of those questionable transactions, and time the short sellers reports are correct, there have been situations, there was one short selling firm that went after General Electric saying, that's a big, General, and then they said they are a big scam, and all, General Electric is still in existence, nothing has happened to them. If you look at Tesla, it's the world's most shorted stock, but, the stock's also doing extremely well. So not every time, you can take a lot of value to it. So I'm not saying every time you see a short seller's report, as an auditor, we should grab onto it and say, okay, everything that is said here is correct. But at least we have a reasonable requirement to kind of understand what's there, and what are the allegations, and is there some merit to it, right? There were also situations like in Wirecard situation, the Singapore regulator had raided them, and they found issues, and one of the Singapore head of that, and so again, that was again ignored. And there was actually Financial Times, a leading daily in UK. They published stories on the accounting practices on Wirecard. In fact, they actually had an inside whistleblower who actually gave them a lot of, books and, record keeping stuff and invoices and bills. And they said, hey, this is what's happening. There's a lot of manipulation happening. Even there, they were going after the messenger rather than kind of understanding, what was going on. Again, these are all, like I said, benefit, I'm sure, every major company, there are always, whistleblower complaints that keep coming in, and stuff like that. So not that every time it is true, but it's important to at least understand what these are and see what we can learn from that, right? The other thing that was very interesting, when you look at Wirecard is web companies, right? And if you look at, all these crazy frauds that's happens, you always find this is a common theme, right? Right from the days of Enron, when they had all these special purpose entities and all these various entities and how they tried to keep debt in some books and, revenues in another book and, they try to do all that. Or even, the latest one in terms of, Cafe Coffee Day and, the number of entities, or even Satyam, there was about 300 entities that Satyam used to kind of rotate. And a lot of times what happens is, as an auditor, we are only auditing certain entities and we don't get, information into others. But you also have to understand, when things go wrong, unfortunately, the public may not understand the nitty-gritties of which entities you audited, which ones you didn't. And if you feel that, material aspects of the entity is not being audited by, us, there's probably some level of disclaimer or, highlighting of that needs to happen, right? Even in the case of Wirecard, they acquired a bunch of companies. I was just looking at their filings for the last several years. A lot of them with low revenue, limited profitability, several, and in fact, there was also a situation where one of the individuals, was associated with, fraud and money laundering and wire acts. He had actually, they're dealing with people like that. And, going back to what Mr. Satish said, right? Like, also understanding the background of the people that you're dealing with, right? If you have situation where, one of your former CEOs, had, several undisclosed companies and he was associated with companies, that were alleged to commit, such big frauds, you as an auditor want to think, do I want to be associated with them? Do I want to be doing more work? Do I want to understand these things better, right? Moving on to, again, coming to the risk management failures, right? Like if you see, obviously when failures like this happen, you really start to question what's the corporate governance of this entity, what kind of tone at the top did they have, who was in the board. And, if you look at some of these things until 2019, for a company that was in the DAX and it's, one of the 30 biggest companies in Germany, they didn't even have dedicated committees for audit and risk at their board levels until 2019. Obviously by the time they created, the company is almost into bankruptcy, right? And also if you look at the size of the compliance team, right, they had 20 people in their compliance team, which is, for a company with 6,000 people to have a 20-member team, in the compliance department, just doesn't make sense, right? Mr. Jalman talked about, in Kotak and in banks, there's a lot of, compliance requirements. So you need to the 3 lines of defense model. You want to have a good control and you want to have a second line of defense, which is, the risk and compliance. And the third level is the internal auditor, right? So if the first level and the second level are not good, the third level cannot, function effectively. And which is, very clear in this particular case as well, where, when you look at the size of the compliance department, it was not adequate. And if you compare that with an HSBC, they have 6,000, compliance staff, right? I mean, for a which is almost, I mean, it's a much bigger company. I mean, that was the size of Wirecard itself. But if you look at it, it's almost 2.6% of its workforce, right? So clearly, again, it's not just the numbers, right? Mr. Satish also spoke about using data analytics and, trying to understand. So you could have a small team, but you could have a powerful team. But if you, have a 20-member team, obviously, that enough for a company of that size and magnitude. Then, I want to kind of finally wrap up with, some of the things saying, it's always good to blame the auditors, in situations like this. And like I said, I've been an auditor for 25 years. So I want to say, are the auditors the only ones to be blamed? Who else, could have, done things, right? That's what I say, when you come to, unearthing fraud, or, non-compliance or, financial errors, irregularities, I think everybody who's associated with company has some role or other, right? So even in the Wirecard situation, I know, the auditor, Ernst & Young was with them for 10 years. They didn't have an internal auditor, but, the external auditor was with them for, 10 years. I mean, do they have a huge responsibility? The answer is probably yes. But are they the only ones who should have detected it? I feel, maybe not, right? If you look at BaFin, right? Financial in Germany. Now, they have an oversight, and this was clearly one of the biggest, financial services companies in Germany. And, when the short sellers were publishing these reports, rather than going after the company, what, the regulator was doing was going after the short sellers and, they started taking them on. And so, again, this is a very, very unhealthy sign where the regulator starts, siding with one person and, trying to stop the whistleblowers and, so that, so I clearly feel, they have some role to play. And the analysts, right? I mean, if you look at, just 3 months before the bank, this entity failed, there were, 8 buy ratings, 12 hold ratings, almost no sell ratings, right? So everybody is kind of in the party together. If you talk to the analysts, they'll say, no, we relied on the auditor's financial statements. We relied on the rating agencies. But the problem is everybody is relying on, each other rather than to understand, what's going on with the company. And then you had the rating agency again, just last year they had given a Baa3 long-term issuer rating, which is again says that, the company is financially strong and viable. But, when the company doesn't have, $2 billion in cash and, you give them a rating like this and the cash never existed, obviously, when you look at it, it's kind of some, seems, and then last but not least, even SoftBank, right? They just, it's a big investing, conglomerate and based out of Japan. They invested about 900 million euros, almost $1 billion of a convertible note. And, what they did, at some point they kind of exited the note and, protected their investment. Again, where was the due diligence, right? I mean, you can't just rely on, the auditors, sometimes, when deals, you another team of auditors to kind of understand, what's going on, and kick the tires and, do a little bit of that. So again, that's where I feel, it's important to understand that, it's not just the auditors, right? I mean, it's important that, everybody has a role to play, in these kind of situations. As a former auditor, I hate it, when every time a scandal happens, the first question they ask is, where are the auditors? I almost feel like the auditor's role is like an umpire in a cricket match, right? A cricket match, an umpire stands and gives hundreds of decisions and nobody even notices who he is, right? Sachin Tendulkar is batting on 99 and before DRS, if somebody gave him out, when he nicked, the ball, everybody's like, oh my God, this is the umpire, and everybody takes off on him, right? That's how I feel as an auditor, right? You do so much good come out there, that's doing well, has an auditor behind the scene, doing a lot of hard work and, trying to, influence the control environment on a day-to-day basis, and nobody ever talks about them. But the moment one bad apple comes out somewhere and, somebody does something wrong, then everybody starts talking about the auditors, right? And I really think, it's very unhealthy to, do it that way. It's important for us to, talk to the auditors when things are going well, right? Not just talk to them when, there's an issue, right? And that's important, and that's important for us as professionals to, for us to get to that culture, right? See, that's what I want to do as part of, in these forums and, when I talk to people. And now that I'm in the business, I've been, there are, teams that I, sometimes, we all have a day job, and when an auditor comes, it is sometimes of a little bit of a, added burden, but I just try to tell them, the the value that the auditor brings in, and, make sure that we all realize, that they all have a role to play, when things are going well, to make sure things continue to go well. That's all I had. I think, we also have a Q&A session, so I'm just going to pause here. And stop sharing, and so that we can go back to, Q&As. Is somebody going to moderate the Q&As? How do we get the questions? Do we know?
Sir will be moderating the session, and he'll be available. He'll come back in a minute. Just give us. Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Mr. Nandan,
It was a great session, sir. How short sellers create reports and try to plunder. Very good thought process. In fact, I got a forensic audit report of a very well established big company. So when I say I was astonished, then when I started going into history, I was taken aback that short sellers create reports in order to short sell and make a lot of money. So this is the reason. Very good. Very good. Nice presentation by all of you. So should we go on for the question answer session? We have 20 minutes. We can have some questions which have come. Can we go ahead?
Yes, please.
Sir, my first question to all of you is that how during the process of audit, if there are some reporting issues, the management or the senior management does not allow the report issues to be reported, what has to be the stand of the auditor, how he has to work on that? I'll individually ask all of you to answer on that. I saw Jaman by speaking on that also. He spoke very well that one has not to be towed down, but at times when the same people who are assigning the work, if they get offended, how one has to manage that? I would need your views. Over to Jaman bhai.
As I said, I would still, if to assess yourself, you have to listen to the other side of the point. So if you have a point of view and the management has another point of view, listen to him by all means. I don't think we should be completely dismissive. But after you've listened to it and you are still convinced about the fact that it is a wrong thing to do, I do not think you should buckle. Because ultimately, as I said, you will have differences. I mean, I do not think if you have two individual people who think, there will be some differences or the other at any stage. And I'm presuming that once you are in a company and you are at some senior management, there's a level of maturity where that management also has to accept some mistakes. But if you believe that there's something wrong, like some of the examples where Balaji talked about in Wirecard or what may have happened in Satyam, if you believe that is wrong, I do not think you have an option but to stand up to it. Go to the audit committee and whatever. Right now, you always have encouraged audit committee members to have independent discussions with the audit teams, independent of the management. So bring up some of those issues there, and the chemistry which you have will come around. And I do not think it's better to have that difference sorted out at that stage than, at some stage 3 years later, you are answerable to some investigation agency or whatnot. Even otherwise, if I have to ultimately look at myself in the mirror and check out whether what I have done is right or wrong, I don't think it will be right to say that, I've connived to something. By all means, I'm repeating, listen to the other point of view. And if there is merit, get convinced about it.
I'll just, I completely agree with Jamin. We have to be reporting the thing as it happens. One difficulty, if I will say, is that if it's a fraud against the management, then it's okay. But if it's a fraud by the management, then it becomes, then you're in a little deeper water, and you will have to report. I mean, there's no compromise on that. There's not even a small iota of doubt, but it has to be handled tactfully. And maybe the audit committee is the one place that one can go.
I think, I would tend to agree. And, I actually have a real life example, right? I mean, to what Mr. Jamin and Satish said, right? So in terms of, you need to stand up for yourself. And Fidelity company, brilliant company. But in one of my past avatars, when I was head of audit, for a large company, I had a similar, what, Mr. Satish just said, right? What happens when management itself is, committing fraud, and I'm the head of audit, right? And I have, in that particular instance, there was a transaction that we were looking at that the company makes significant amount of money in that particular thing, which we felt was, illegal, and it's not allowed per law, and we published a report, that this was not okay. And management was not allowing me to publish that report. They said, no, this is, you don't understand it. And, it was a bunch of lawyers in senior management, and I was the auditor trying to convince lawyers. I just didn't have my way. And, at some point, again, this is pretty drastic. I said, life is too short. If my credibility is at stake, I cannot, be associated with that particular association. And then, I moved on, and, when I look back, when, the stock price of that company at $70 and it went to almost, $10, and, the regulator came, and, there were subpoenas, and the chairman of the company fled to another country and all that. And then I'm like, whoa, this is exactly, and one of the things they called out was, things that we had reported. Our report never got published. We wrote that report, but what we did was, we put it in the systems, and we said, guys, if the court ever wants to look at our work papers, visits it, I'm not going to not issue it, we put it in our system. So sometimes, as auditors, we have to take those calls, right? I mean, it's an extreme example. I don't think, it happens very often, but our credibility is at stake. When you see something and it doesn't make sense, it's, like Mr. Jamin said, you have to stand up. There's no question about, and that brings respect, right? A lot of times, people respect, like me, if you come to my business and you question me, and if I'm going to have respect for you as an auditor. So I think that's pretty important.
Great. I will like to just surprise the entire house. The institute also has a committee, SESURA, Committee on Unjustifiable Removal of Auditor. In case the management feels that they want you out for no fault of yours or because you're doing the work in the right direction, so the institute is there to serve and save the membership. There's one question from Sri Harsha who says, can you please throw some light on internal conflicts arising between the internal auditor and management over handling of certain specific process control issues? Over to you if anybody wants to answer.
I think this is just this happens all the time. There are some processes, and there are some very deep reports. This has to be discussed. I mean, what is the interference of any management got to do with this? I mean, you got to bring out clearly what the deficiencies are, and put it up to the audit committee for deliberations. I mean, I don't see these are things which will happen off and on, especially when the auditor comes out with some very.
So if I understand the question right, maybe they talked about conflict of interest. Maybe I'll just tell you my 2 cents on that as well. I think I totally agree with what just Satish said. As an auditor, I'm not an auditor now, but 6 months ago, I was an auditor. So a lot of times they call me to, let's say we've done an audit of payroll and we're revamping the entire payroll process, right? And then they would want me to be a part of that committee that's there. And sometimes I'm part of risk committees, and when things get changed, and when I sit on those committees, I make it very clear. That's where I think this conflict of I get involved in picking of a vendor, and when I'm picking a vendor, I say, okay, does he have good, what are the controls he has, how's the tool, and blah 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 and all that. And I typically try to be a non-voting member in these committees. I say, hey, I'm here to just give you, qualitative inputs, but ultimately you should do what is right. And I also make it very clear when I am in those meetings saying, you may pick the vendor that I recommended, but 1 year later, I'll be auditing you and I'll ask you the same question saying, why did you pick this vendor? And I'm going to beat you up. At that point, you can't come and tell me that I picked, So I said, this is your decision. I'm giving you data points to make that decision, but I want you to hold the accountability, right? See, as an internal auditor, I have a lot of knowledge of, doing work and understanding and, interacting with a lot of stuff, right? So I don't want that to go waste. So as an internal auditor, I would want to pass that on to my team, and, if somebody in procurement wants to out of it, I'm very, very happy. And a lot of times we build algorithms that we give to our teams, right? But then we in an audit, we do some things and we find issues, right? And then we give it to them. But 3 years later or 1 year later or even 3 months later, I could come and audit and I'll say, hey, there's a fault with the algorithm. But the point is, you can't say the auditor gave it to me. I want you to own it. And I think so it's very important. That's a great question in terms of conflict of interest, right? As an internal auditor, you have to walk, you're doing a tightrope walking. So you have to make sure that, people don't use you because, sometimes they say, Balaji approved it. No, I didn't approve it, right? I just gave you my 2 cents. I want you to approve it based on my inputs.
Thank you. You want to say something, Jamal bhai?
You will always have some differences on the other. I said you will have to discuss it out and see what happens. It's not that you will agree. And there are times when if there are differences and if you believe that the process has a flaw, what is the mitigating control that the management is doing? And if the mitigating control is good enough, you may be fine. You may make a recommendation and thereafter it is up to the management.
हमने एक मेल पहले करी थी देखियो कॉर्पोरेशन में उस पे क्या लिखा था वो निकालना खाली ये लिखा था बस इतना लिखा था खोल के Sir, we have a question from Mr. Subramaniam R. He says, good evening, sirs. Just wanted to know about the soft controls in terms of finalizing the entire internal audit program when physical internal audit could not be done. So as to say in current pandemic, as remote review may have audit limitations. So he wants what we have to take care in the audit program, sir. Any suggestions or advice you want to give?
Yes, I mean, audit programs have certainly need to be tweaked, and they have been tweaked. In so many discussions that I've had with my peers, we found some ways to, get around it. Yes, physical verification, if you are asking, actually going to the location has not been possible in the last couple of times. However, of course, in my company, we've had our audit staff co-located with the plants itself. So that, turned out to be an advantageous thing because they were always walk to work rather than work from home. So some of these things have helped, but if you really look at these aspects, it has been a difficult phase. But as we said that, I mean, everybody is facing through this difficulty. It's not only auditors are having issues. Even the statutory auditors have completed audits of all the companies. So things have happened. It's not that it hasn't. Every one of us, whether it's an auditor or an auditee, have been confronted with this, forced to confront with this, and we found our own solutions.
From that point of view, the timing couldn't have been worse because it happened in end of March when all of us were closing. So the statutory auditors, all of us got together. Maybe if I look back, pushed back our results by a week or so, but I think we found ways around it. And whether it's internal audit or statutory audit, I think over a period of time, we've also found some efficient ways of doing things. I'm now questioning myself, Why did we have to do a lot of this physically? If it can be done by a remote way and whatnot, use digital. Of course, there would be a few areas where you would have wished that a physical presence is important. In this environment, you'll have to live with some of that. But otherwise, I think as we come out of this at some point of time, you'll find more efficiencies being built in because of this experience.
Yes, sir. Mr. Balaji, would you like to say something?
I think these, I think it got covered. So I think,
Great.
in fact,
Great.
even before, now in this digital environment, we are physicals becoming less and less, but, like to the extent, the one thing people can consider is to the extent they've not done something, just call it out, right? Let's not keep it up through. If you've not done a stock count or not done something, just, disclaim it and make sure nothing is left to people's discretion, right? So if you've done alternate procedures, just call it out so that people know that, you've not been able to go to the warehouse. You've just looked at, things electronically and stuff like that. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question we have. This is the last question we'll take because we have our Honorable Vice Chairman also waiting to give his concluding remarks. It is from CA Upendranath Verma. He says, what are the safeguards available to DISA auditor with respect to internal audit of artificial intelligence companies from remote location due to COVID-19 restrictions / compulsions? Whether limited assurance option is reported and can it be exercised in such situation? You all are aware, but I like to give the background. We had come out with a SIA, Standard Internal Audit, saying that you can give either limited assurance if you don't get proper documents or you are not convinced on certain areas, or you give a reasonable assurance. So he's saying that due to COVID-19, if he's not able to exercise proper control, can he give limited assurance? Sir.
See, the only question I would have is, for a DISA auditor, especially in this technology world, I don't know how COVID would limit the scope of his. Maybe there are certain unique situations where, it may, happen. I can understand but to what I said to the response to my previous question, see, I always say either you convince or you get convinced, right? There's no in between, right? So if there's not enough evidence that's been provided to you to convince that things are, working well, I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that comes out. And if we've not done enough and we've not seen anything coming out, we should definitely, disclaim is what I would say. Over to the others.
I would only say, let's keep COVID aside for the moment. I mean, if this situation came about even otherwise, what would I done as an auditor? I think the angle of bringing COVID into it gives a different feeling of a different answer. But according to me, there is no COVID in this on this aspect. On this aspect, there is no COVID. Whatever had to happen without COVID or with COVID, whatever you would have done otherwise, you have to do now.
I would completely agree with that. I think this situation is no different from what you would be, and what you would have done otherwise, do the same thing here.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're on mute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, in fact, we remain so long, day-long meetings, so many webinars. Today we had 3 webinars. I had one webinar now in Aurangabad student organization, so I had to quit in between. At times you are not able to gauge when you have to be on mute or when you have to unmute. But still, sir, life has always to be unmuted so that you listen to good things, you enjoy friends and listen to words of wisdom from distinguished guests like you. So in order to show our gratitude and to give that closing remarks, I have my Honorable Vice Chairman, Sri Prasanna Kumar, to do the honors. Prasanna ji, the dice is all yours now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nandaji. This was a very excellent session throughout. Stalwart speakers, sir, I'm not telling just as praise you because you have spent your time. It was really a great session. Everyone enjoyed. In fact, we received a lot of messages also. They having enjoyed the session. For me personally also. So because of you, we are getting name and fame. I received appreciation from many members. I thank, like in the opening batsman, Mr. Jaimin Bhatt, So we made a very good beginning so that he enthused the rest of the speakers also to play very well. So the expectation of the bank audit is the very domain of chartered accountants nowadays. The variety of audits are there. What an internal audit function, be it revenue audit, concurrent audit, income tax expenditure audit, NPA audit, monitoring, so many things are there. So what are the expectations the bankers have been lucidly explained. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot for your excellent presentation. And then CA Satish Shanaji, so internal audits and compliance, yes, he is a middle order batsman. Unless the enthusiasm given the first batsman was followed the middle order also, he has also played very good, very good innings. Sir, your presentation is so nice, and you are telling that you're in between. I told you that it is sweet. That is very sweet session that you have carried out, and we are all benefit out of that, sir. Thank you very much for your presentation. I come to see Balaji Ranganathan. He only explained about the cricket, how it suits here. He is not a night watchman. Nandaji,
I am there, sir.
Okay.
Sir, how can I go, sir? How can I go?
No, I thought you were trying to tell something. Yeah. So he has very nicely presented why internal auditors, what they should learn from the lesson that we have. And he was talking about dinner. So I don't want to stand between you and the dinner. Let me make my presentation sweet and short. But I'm telling you, sir, we are not waiting for dinner. It was a feast of knowledge today. Our feast is already over. We don't want to have any dinner. Already our stomach is full. Brain is also full with a good presentation you made. So, moreover, you had the wisdom of sharing. I have seen him as a speaker and a viewer and listener. I have also seen him. I came to know Nandaji. He is an auditor as an auditee also. It's a very rare combination.
Great.
So all three of you made this a great success, and close to 2,900 members is a great learning for all of us. Thank you very much, sir. Soon we would like to meet and have many more sessions for the benefit of the profession and the fraternity. Thank you. I thank all the viewers, the participants. When the numbers are huge, it gives a lot of enthusiasm for us to work more and more and to see that all of you benefit out of this one. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Two things before we conclude. Two things. The latest tally of score is 3,050 members as of now. 3050 at 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening is a big. I will tell you, when we restrict, the last webinar we restricted 2,500 members. 10 minutes, 25 members, 100 members were full. And now listening to you, whenever we recast, the number will be close to 10,000 now.
Wow.
Second thing, Brother Prasanna, you spoke exceedingly well about them. The only driving point before them is the passion. I am reminded of Shahid Bhagat Singh. When he was to be executed, the international law of prison says that a person can only be executed, can only be hanged when the sun is going up. When he was hanged, the sun had gone down totally, set. The executor came and said to Bhagat Singh that you are to be executed. And what did Bhagat Singh do? He picked up a small piece of coal and wrote on the walls, because he was not allowed to write. He never had paper or pen. What did he write? He wrote, कुछ इस कदर मेरी फितरत से वाकिफ है मेरी कलम. कुछ इस कदर मेरी फितरत से वाकिफ है मेरी कलम. इश्क लिखना भी चाहूं तो इनकलाब लिखा जाता है. इश्क लिखना भी चाहूं तो इनकलाब लिखा जाता है. What makes the difference is the passion. And I have seen all three of you being passionate. I am listening to Mr. Balaji for the first time, but I've interacted with Jamir Bhai so many times. I find him the best of the persons I've ever. Mr. Satish Rai, same thing, sir. And Mr. Balaji, I keep you in the same category. We're very proud to have people like you, and we'll have more much sessions in times to come. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Very nice.